You're listening to Coding Blocks, episode 50. 50, baby! Woo! We made it to 50. Subscribe to us and leave us a review on iTunes, Stitcher, and more using your favorite podcast app.
Visit us at codingblocks.net. We can find show notes, examples, discussion, and other stuff.
Send your feedback, questions, and rants to comments at codingblocks.net. Follow us on Twitter at codingblocks or head to www.codingblocks.net and find all our social links there at the top of the page. With that, I'm Alan Underwood.
I'm Joe Zach.
And I'm Michael Outlaw. And it's time for me trying to say some names. I feel like people are messing with me now with some of these names. I actually, this time isn't so bad though. I don't feel like that. So, we always start with saying thanks to people that left the reviews in iTunes and Stitcher. And some names are way more challenging to pronounce than others, at least for me, because names are like kryptonite to me. But this time I don't feel like it was too terribly bad. I was going to take Stitcher.
No,
yeah.
I got Stitcher. You go ahead and do iTunes.
No, but I practiced Stitcher.
No, you do iTunes.
I got nothing on iTunes.
It's all you. Do it.
What?
I'm about to do both of them.
All right, here we go. You ready? Trey Waters, Clever Cookies.
You cheated.
We were Shizo, Dedouche, Abraham Linksys. That one I loved. Also like this one a lot. To Nickfinity and Beyond. And then Trigger PLZ, Esam Candidly, I guess.
Canadily.
You think? Okay. And S Mike 03 or S Mick. No,
All
S
right.
Mike.
So iTunes, here we go. Hello Basti, Tux DK, David BC, Anime Girl 44, Bacarlino, Embedded Emily, Don Neal 14, PS 180, and Dan Clark Photo. So
I tripped you up there.
you might have cheated a little bit.
Advantage of going first.
So thank you, everybody, for taking the time to do that. Some really amazing reviews in there. Made our days. As always, we sincerely love these reviews. So please do. If you haven't already, do it. Make somebody smile.
All right. Also, we have a lot of other stuff, a lot of other news. I don't know about community news. I don't know. Maybe we need a little subsection here, but I'll try not to take too much time with it. But do have a few things I wanted to call out, like Hussein and Mike. Check your email. It's 2 of the 4 winners from episode 47, and we haven't heard back from you guys about your addresses. So hit us up because we want to send you free books. And also want to give a shout out to Angry Zoot. We haven't mentioned her in a while, and she's awesome. Does martial arts, so beware. Don't mess with her. Also, some other big news. Cynical Developer has launched. James Sidart, we've mentioned him a few times. He's got a new podcast out. Just started talking about things like Cake and XAML and React with Zach Brady. All really good, so that's exciting.
Yeah, definitely go check it out. Although we need to tell James to stay close to his microphone.
Could you not hear him?
I couldn't. He failed a few times on me with the Zach Brady interview.
Wow.
Awesome. Very cool. Also, this is really interesting. We actually got an opportunity to give away a free pass to the O'Reilly Software Architecture contest, Software Architecture Convention that just started, actually, I guess, today. It depends on when you're listening to it, right? But anyway, it's a conference. It was in San Francisco. We had a $1,700 ticket to give away. We had to give it away quickly, and so we ran a quick contest on Twitter and awarded the prize to Mark McDowell, who sent us a picture from the conference, and so glad to see he's having a good time. And I wanted to mention that means you guys should follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and mailing list or anywhere else you can find us, because sometimes we have stuff to give away that's really awesome, and we aren't able to get it on the show for some reason, so you should follow us and get free stuff.
Totally.
Yep. Also, last episode I mentioned CodeMade as my tip, but I forgot who introduced me, and I apologize. It was Maurizo Pazban, and so just wanted to say thanks for that. And also wanted to mention, this is not really related to people. But we do have an O'Reilly discount code right now. Some more related to the conference. But it's 50% off most print and 40% off ebooks. And I don't know how long this is going to last, but it's a pretty good deal. So you can get a book like Soft Skills and JavaScript, the good parts. And there's no affiliate fee because I can't figure out how to set it up. It's just discount for you. So go get it while you can.
And you do that by coming to our site and clicking the banner on the right-hand side of the page. Or if you're on mobile, you probably have to scroll down to the bottom.
Yep.
All right. Excellent news.
All right. Yeah, so, sorry. I, last time was conference season for me. It felt like we talked a lot about conferences. And, guess what happened? Between last episode and now, I went to another one. So this time was the DevFest 2016 for the Google Developer Group. And, we'll include a link to that. There was some pretty cool stuff. Sorry that you couldn't be there. But there was some pretty cool topics that they talked about. My main interest there was the machine learning track, we'll call it. But yeah, they had some really cool stuff that they were talking about in general. Firebase was another one of the conversations. Have you played with Firebase yet? Have you checked out Firebase?
Nope.
It was like cross-platform capabilities for like Android, iOS, some C++, some JavaScript, heavy on Android for obvious maybe reasons, but some features things that we've done in like, maybe an AWS environment, but now it was like, here's this nice SDK for free features. Well, there were tiered pricing, but there was a free tier, but like, some analytics, some key value pair storage, file storage was another one of the features. Testing features that were built into it. So I'm by no means doing Firebase that's full justice, but yeah, it had some pretty cool features that were built into it. And then TensorFlow was another one of the big conversations. Again, like I said, I went more for the machine learning track. And so TensorFlow came up, which was another Google technology that was talked about there.
Oh, I didn't realize TensorFlow is Google. I've seen a few demonstrations of it doing some really cool stuff with like just visually and just some cool things with neural networks and TensorFlow that I don't understand.
Most people probably don't understand it yet. But yeah.
Well, now you're making me question. No, TensorFlow was originally developed by researchers and engineers working on the Google Brain team. Yeah.
Awesome.
They have a brain team?
I mean, it's Google, so are you surprised that they would have a brain team?
Yep.
Like, you'd be more shocked if you found out that they didn't have a brain team, right?
Right, that's true.
Like, what do you mean they only have an eyeball team?
Now, is it Google or Alphabet?
Google. Google.
All right. We got some scary stuff here. Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know. I feel like, okay, so there was that whole conversation that we had, I don't know, what was that now? Like a week or two ago, a couple weeks ago, about the Android, iOS thing, right? And, obviously, I was wrong. I got told I was wrong a lot. So that's fine. I get that because, it's one of those, Android versus iOS is a heated conversation, right? But if you recall, let's take all the heat away from it, though. There was the one part of the conversation that we talked about where, with the bug bounties, right? And I'd mentioned that, at least on iOS, maybe I have this false sense of security, whether it's true or not, I don't know. But this was like a story that came up just yesterday, I want to say. And it just kind of resonated exactly, or maybe it was this morning, but it kind of resonated exactly what I was talking about. So there's a story that the New York Times reported about Android phones, some Android phones, where the phones were sending, the security experts discovered that the phones were sending, I had it right here and then scrolled, but it was sending like the complete text conversation and call logs. Here it is. CryptoWire, the security firm that discovered the vulnerability, said the dupe software transmitted the full contents of text messages, contact lists, call logs, location information, and other data to a Chinese server. This was software that was just built into the phone, an Android phone. And it was kind of going along the lines of like where we were talking about, during that previous conversation where on the iOS, it felt like, well, that couldn't happen, because Apple's controlling both sides, the hardware and the software. But I thought that was an interesting and scary story that, that existed and that was a thing. But it was on lower end phones. So in fairness, this wasn't on your like high end, Samsung or, Nexus line, or I guess now Google line phones.
The Pixel, yeah. This one says it was the Blue products, and there were like 120,000 of its phones that were affected. And you know what stinks about it, though, is nowadays...
Well, their software runs on 700 million phones.
All over the world, yeah. So
the Blue product was one... I'm sorry to cut you off, but the Blue was one American manufacturer.
Yeah, so what I was going to say, though, one of the scary things is most people don't pay attention when they install apps nowadays for all the privileges it asks for. So, I mean, just about anything could do it. This one happened to be baked into the phone, which really stinks. But,
yeah, right.
Yeah, I mean, it's...
And that's kind of why I was saying, like, maybe it's a false sense of security that I have with iOS. Like, I'll concede to that, right?
Yeah, well, the thing is, most people don't care even after they know they're being spied on. So, totally. Who cares if they are or not?
It really kind of stinks. It kind of makes people want to go back to a flip phone. And I get that.
Honestly,
seriously.
Bring back the Motorola Razr.
Seriously.
Do you remember that?
Yeah,
I
totally.
love that phone.
I mean, yeah.
That phone was awesome back in the day.
So, I mean,
that was like the original phone that everybody craved. And, like before iPhone, everybody wanted the Razr.
Yep. It was slim. It was pretty. Yeah. That's one of the things that kind of stinks. Like I found myself in that situation. I mean, I digress. I don't want to go in too much on the phone thing, but yeah, it's a scary world with this stuff. In other news, I ended up going to the MVP Summit, which was amazing. It was out there in Bellevue, Washington. Gorgeous out there, gray the entire time, sort of wet. But got I mean, seriously. Oh, and because of the time change, it was dark every day at like 4:30 in the afternoon. It was a little brutal. But
hey, not to cut you off, but it looks like here in the show notes you had an expletive here because you had to like mark out some of your show notes here. Yeah. You did something, and it starts with an F. I don't know.
Right. So I actually did a little bit of functional programming and some F#. And it was kind of cool because the way that they were like, hey, you want to learn this thing, go download this dojo from GitHub. And I'll have to find that link and put it in the show notes.
Now, wait a minute. Now everybody's going to think dojo. They're going to think of the JavaScript framework.
No, not the JavaScript framework. It was actually do like a little, like a lesson type thing.
It's and like a kata?
No, it wasn't a kata. It was
dojo.
more like literally just try this. They call it a dojo up on their GitHub project page. So, but basically it was draw a tree with F#. And it was pretty neat. Like most people would have this nice, pretty looking tree. And I was like, man, that's not cool. I need something organic. So I kind of did a random tree generator. And that was kind of neat.
Are we talking about like a fractal trees? What kind of trees
a
are
fractal tree.
Oh, fractal. Okay.
Yeah. So it was a lot of fun. It was literally drawing lines and, doing angles and all that kind of stuff. So it was a lot of fun.
I like his description of it. I drew lines and angles and stuff.
Yeah, that's what it did. So, there was another one that was cool that was excellent that they had basically like a bot program. So you could literally create like a messenger and then have a bot do responses to it. So like you could say something along the lines of, hey, what's the fastest car in the world? And it would know based off some of the wording that you did in there. You'd train your bot, and it would go do a Bing search for you.
So is that why your responses in Slack have been so weird? Because you replaced it with an Alan Slack bot?
It's amazing, isn't it?
That makes so much more sense now.
All it does is say awesome and cool.
I thought something was really robotic about it.
Yeah, I've noticed you've been a lot better at draw something lately.
Right.
Draw something. Who plays that anymore? Wow. Welcome to 2010.
Oh,
I still play.
But that was totally.
What was that? OMG Pop?
OMG Pop. Wow, that's good stuff. So yeah, I mean the conference was amazing. I can't talk about most of it because I'm under NDA. But
HoloLens. Can you talk about the HoloLens?
I can talk about HoloLens. So I did.
Actually, he wasn't supposed to talk about F Sharp, and now he's in trouble.
I did attend a session that was basically being able to develop VR and AR apps, augmented reality or virtual reality apps, using either Unity 3D, the Unreal Engine, or there's another thing called Sharp, and we'll leave a link in the show notes. And it was pretty cool. I mean, they kind of
It's
It's like
is it?
UHR Sharp. It's really it's weird.
I guess that one was created in the South.
Probably
What kind of language you got there? I got me some Sharp.
Some Sharp.
That's Sharp right there.
So
Not flat. I was playing with flat earlier.
So it was. So here was the thing, right? Like the presentation was cool and all, but at the end they were like, "Hey, does anybody want to come up and try out a HoloLens?" And I looked around and everybody was sitting down. Like, dude, I bolted to the front of the room. I was like, I got to check this thing out. Man, it is way more amazing than what I ever thought it would be.
What Alan realized later is it was a rhetorical question. They really didn't want anyone to jump up.
That's fine.
So
You
this
know
is
what's
awkward.
You know what was funny is like it was kind of like everybody's like, "Hey, everybody go get a plate and eat," and everybody stands around and waits for that first guy. Dude, after I got up there were like 30 people behind me.
You were like, I don't mind being the first guy. Get out of the way.
Yeah, that's right. Here I come. Man, it is. Like seriously, like I could take an object and I had no idea how to navigate this thing. Like the dude's looking at me like I'm an idiot, and he's like, "You got to pinch it." And I'm like, "What do you mean pinch it?" Right? So I'm like waving my hand around in the air, and he's like, "No, you got to pinch your fingers." I was like, "Oh, okay, I got it." So I took this puppy and I placed it on
Wait,
top
you
of
didn't pinch a puppy.
I pinched a puppy.
Wait, that's not nice.
And I put him right on top of somebody's head, and it was amazing. The thing would like detect surfaces, like it I can't even describe how cool it was, because literally then I was like, okay, well, that's cool. I stuck him on top of somebody's head. Let me put him on the desk. And sure enough, it would detect it and kind of snap to the desk. And then you turn around and look at something else and look back. And sure enough, there it was. And man, I'm telling you right now, like I've played with some virtual reality things. Like our buddy has the
Oculus?
Man,
I can't-
Oculus.
Yeah, there you
Oculus. And that's neat. Don't get me wrong. That's really cool. It's neat. But there was a whole nother level of involvement with that augmented reality where it really felt like you had something in the room that you could play with.
Okay, now let me ask you this in all fairness, though, to the Oculus Rift. Because when we did play around with that Oculus Rift, it was kind of underpowered at the time. I mean, we all admitted to that, right?
It was off a laptop. But so here's what I'll tell you.
So do you think that they just had like a lot more hardware to drive that experience for the HoloLens?
No, I don't think so. So I think what the difference is just the perception. Like with the augmented reality, as it's called, you're interacting inside your own real world, right? Like you're taking virtual objects and messing with them in your world. Whereas virtual reality is, you're surrounded
right.
by another world. And it would that level of interaction, like they showed some demos, and I think these are on YouTube, where literally, like, imagine you're somebody that's a home designer, right? You walk into somebody's room and you say, "Oh, you want to change out your floors in your room?" You look down there, it detects the surface, and then you pick,
Right.
what you want the surface. Man,
Right. So to be fair, then HoloLens is an augmented reality experience,
Yep.
and the Oculus Rift was a virtual reality experience.
Yep. Both
For those
super
not
cool.
familiar with either.
Yeah, both super
both.
cool. The only thing that was a little bit, and people have said this, like the view area on the HoloLens is a little bit limited. Like you've got to be looking in like the lens area, otherwise you lose focus of what you said.
Aren't you wearing like a big giant?
You are, but the screen's not as all encompassing as you might think. So that's really the only thing that might have been a little bit of a drawback. But man, seriously, some super cool technology.
So are you able to scratch your unibrow with the helmet on, or do you have to take it off?
Are you saying I need to shave?
I'm saying it's a concern for me.
I mean,
I have a
let's
hair dryer.
pretend that
talked
we
about
were
that a
saying
while
that.
back.
Let's pretend that we were saying that that you did, just for the sake of argument. Let's not make this weird. Could you theoretically, if you had to scratch your unibrow?
I don't remember. I was
You were so immersed in the experience.
I seriously was.
You forgot all about your unibrow.
I was so enjoying that. I didn't even realize I didn't have clothes on. Right.
So
Like, I
you're
was just
admitting to the
standing
unibrow. That's what we're getting.
Yes. Seriously, like if you ever get the chance, like apparently if you go to a Microsoft store where they have them, you can schedule somebody on our Slack channel. I wish I could remember who it was, said that you can actually go schedule an appointment to check it out, and they'll have like a 15-minute thing that you can go mess with. So I highly recommend it. If you're into tech at all, it's a lot of fun.
Man, for a minute there, I just had like a flashback of like the days of the arcade, right? Where you would quote schedule your time by like dropping your quarters on like
That's right.
I'm next on this Mortal Kombat game, yo.
That's right.
I'm gonna come in here with some Scorpion or some Sub-Zero. I got this. Don't worry,
Dude. That's amazing. Another thing that just happened. This happened today. Actually, was Microsoft Connect. I don't know if you guys are watching it, but they were showing a lot of the new stuff that they were doing. And one of them is Visual Studio on the Mac. Not Visual Studio Code,
right?
But Visual Studio on the Mac. That's actually really exciting for me. So I plan on downloading that and playing with it here pretty soon because that's, man, what a world we live in. And on that, they also mentioned, and this kind of blew my mind, Microsoft is the top contributor on GitHub.
Yeah, but I thought that's been known, right? Huh? That's not like they didn't just cross that threshold, right?
No, it's probably happened, but I'd never even heard that. It was just kind of crazy. I know Docker was up there at the top. I don't remember what else it was, but Microsoft is the biggest contributor to open source on GitHub. That's pretty cool. It's a different world we live in.
Now the Visual Studio on the Mac. Okay, so for one, because we already got some feedback about, I guess one of us said something about getting a tattoo if there was ever a Visual Studio for the Mac.
Oh, crap. That sounds like something I would say.
Yeah, it does. Totally.
So, yeah, I guess one of us has to get a tattoo. But, because I'm afraid it was me. Maybe. I don't know. I got to go back and listen to it. I think it was like episode 12 somebody mentioned in maybe the Slack channel or something.
How are you going to remember that?
So it was either tweeted to us or somebody mentioned it in the Slack channel. I don't remember how it came up. I'm pretty sure it was in Slack that somebody was like, "Oh yeah, hey, by the way, you guys were just talking about if it was ever available for the if Visual Studio ever came out for Mac that you'd get it tattooed. You'd get a Microsoft logo tattooed."
Well, I hope it was you.
So
you have to do awkward. It, man. I'm sure the Zune tattoo guy didn't regret it later, right?
Right.
Oh crap! You had to put it like that, too, didn't you? Wow.
Oh man, yeah. I heard a podcast. Was it? I forget. I'll remember the name in a minute. But the people that got the Pepe the Frog like tattoos and stuff. Back when it was kind of a funny meme, and then it got involved in all sorts of like hate memes and all sorts of terrible things. And now those people have this tattoo of this figure that has recently become a figure of hate speech. And now they're like,
wait, somebody on Reply All has a tattoo? Tattoo?
Reply All was the podcast, yeah.
Yeah, they talked with the guy who drew Pepe the Frog and how his friends and family members got this tattoo. And the next thing you know, he's like, you see this character like wearing, all sorts of racist and fascist stuff and whatnot. And so it became a symbol of something very different from how it started out. And all these people have this tattoo and they're, kind of covering up around election season.
Well, yeah. So I guess where I was going with this, though, is that because the Visual Studio, but isn't it more like a rebranding of the Xamarin tools that were already there? So it's not that Microsoft wrote from the ground up, here, or even a port of Visual Studio to the Mac, right?
No.
This is, we made this acquisition of Xamarin, and they have this tool.
Xamarin Studio.
And so we've decided to rename Xamarin Studio to Visual Studio.
I don't think it's just renaming it because they actually showed on that connecting, I believe, somebody just compiling a regular application. So it wasn't... It wasn't for like iOS or Android, I don't think, is what I'm getting at. So Xamarin Studio was always, okay, you could take your core C# stuff and write like your business logic and that kind of thing. But then you could write like your UIs for iOS and for Android. It was basically mobile-based type stuff. And I think they're trying to take it a step further to where you can literally write like desktop type applications. I don't know. I didn't get to see all of it, but I think they're trying to take it a step further. But it is definitely Xamarin Studio that they're now renaming Visual Studio Code.
Is it free now?
Yeah, Xamarin Studio is free since they acquired them.
Oh, okay. Wow. So awesome. So if you have a Mac, you should go get it.
Yeah, I would definitely check it out. I mean, if nothing else, it'd be cool just to see what's out there. But man, times is a changing.
Yeah, I feel like we're going to have to do some research on this because it sounds like one of us is going to have to get a tattoo, so we might as well know why.
It definitely ain't me.
And, well, I mean, it could be you. I don't know.
I promise
this
you,
could
I
be
never
awkward.
said that.
Oh, hey, look what I just found. It was actually Alan that
Right,
said it. Well,
right.
that's awkward. Yeah. So, yeah, definitely want to follow up on that.
All right, and then next up, we've been giving away stickers, people. If you want a sticker, send us a self-addressed stamp envelope. And if you don't know where to send it to, contact us on Twitter, Slack.
I mean, you
email us.
probably don't know where to send it to. That's
You
fair.
probably
I don't know where
yeah.
to send it. I have to look it up.
I mean, yeah, I don't know either.
Okay. So, yeah, just contact us. We'll send you the thing. It'll be the easiest way to go. And we will send you out a sticker or 2 or 3 if you want to give some to your friends. So just holler at us.
All right. So, let's see. Episode 48. So we gave out, in episode 47, we said we were going to give out some copies of Clean Code. And then again in episode 48, we decided to do the same thing. And so we did our drawing. And, well, you know what? Last time I said drum roll, you guys made it really awkward. And it became like speakers were getting blown out and, you know, people ears were bleeding. And now Alan's making machine gun sounds.
That's close to a drum.
So yeah, so I won't say drum roll, but I will let Alan announce the winner. How's that?
Or Joe, you want to do this?
Yes, I'm looking up the last name right now because I don't remember if he put it in the comment. But the winner is
It was
Odvar.
first and last.
All right, Odvar. I'm sorry about your last name, Tengazdal. I'm sure I butchered that, and you should email us your address or your email address if you prefer to have the ebook, and we'll get that to you.
Congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations. And so, all right, so we're going to be talking about Clean Code again, and again giving away a copy. Or are we doing Post Sharp too? Did we decide?
I don't know.
I didn't think so.
Okay, so we're just going to do the copy of Clean Code this episode.
But you should follow us on Twitter or Facebook or whatever your preferred social media platform is, because we do have lots of other stuff to give out that we don't necessarily mention on the show. And you should follow us there for chances to win really expensive, nice prizes.
Yeah.
Like a copy of Post Sharp.
Yes, totally. Like almost $700 worth of a nice prize. So, before we get into this particular episode, I want to ask you guys, so this is my first time reading through Clean Code because I've always written Clean Code.
Wait a minute. I take offense to that because you have definitely read my code more than once. So
Nicely done. So here's the thing that I'm curious if other people have thought that. Like, I'll look at the title of a chapter, like this one, formatting, and I'm like, really? This seems kind of like a boring, not really all that meaty topic. And then I look at it and I'm like, you know what? There was good stuff in here.
Oh, there's better than good stuff. I feel like I have accidentally stumbled upon another VAR Wars.
Yeah, I know we're going to go toe to toe on this one again, but I know what you're saying, Alan. And actually, for me, it goes both ways. So, like, I see chapters like this, and I'm like, I don't want to read this, and I love it. But then there's times I'll buy a book on, like, say, machine learning, and I'm asleep by page 2. You know?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I've actually found every chapter that we've hit so far, I'm like, man, there's really useful, good takeaways from this. And I was surprised. I really was. Being completely honest, I didn't think that would happen like that.
So is it fair to say that you're starting to see why this book is as popular as it is?
Totally not.
It's like,
totally not.
Oh, you see why it's okay. Well, you don't. Okay, tough crowd.
No, it truly is. It's excellent.
So, Uncle Bob, I guess you're going to have to try harder next time with your
right.
next book.
That's right.
Alan is apparently not impressed.
No, I mean totally. Like I'm happy that we decided to do this one. I'm looking forward to in the future picking up Code Complete also because I mean from all the good things I've heard about that one, I have to imagine it's sort of the same type, things going on here.
Wasn't the next one to this one like Clean Coder? Something like that?
Yeah. And I didn't even know that one existed until fairly recently, so I'm looking forward to reading that one. I actually just got a new book on best practices. I'll have to look up what it is and share it, but I was going to read that one, but I'm really excited about that one because it's really short. Actually, I'm going to look up the name right now.
It's called Really Clean Code.
Right. Super clean. No code.
It's an O'Reilly book. I got it, and I kind of opened the package. I'm like, yes, my book's here. It's got a picture of a monkey or something on it. And I lifted it up. I'm like, wait, it's like a magazine. What the? And then so at first I was like upset, because I'm used to coding. Coding books. You basically buy them, and just huge, like 600 pages each.
Right.
But then I was really happy. I was like, oh my gosh.
You could use them to lift up your car.
Yeah. But I got this one. I opened it up. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm actually going to read this.
Anytime you're changing a tire and you run out of a jack stand, you
Yeah.
just grab your
stick it
coding
under there.
books and
Yeah.
lift them up.
It's like
Set the car
Python, the
down on
definitive guide, 9,000 pages.
I mean, in fairness, it did say definitive.
Yeah.
So I feel like, you knew what you were getting into.
Yeah, I guess when you go, like back in the day, you go to the bookstore, right? And you like look and you're like, okay, I need to learn, PHP or something. And so you look at all the books and you see like PHP for Dummies and the O'Reilly books, whatever. Like, they're all roughly around the same price. But one of them is 9,000 pages. Like,
pick
what
that
are you
one
going to get? Yeah.
Right.
Because you're going to be stuck on some stupid problems that are going to be keeping you up all night. So you should get the bigger book and you can, probably find your problem easier.
Actually, you never find it in that big book. That's
No,
the problem, right?
Right.
The index in this thing sucks. When's the last time you used an index instead of Google? Right?
Never.
Man, exactly.
It's been a long time.
I mean, I guess if on a paper book, though, yeah, sure. Right?
I don't know. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into it while Joe's looking for the name of the book. So this one, we're talking about formatting. Like this, again, seemed really unexciting, but then I got into it and I really enjoyed it. So one of the things they said at the very beginning that I thought was so true is if your code's a mess, then people assume that your attention to detail in the app is also a mess. Like that's so true. If you look at a pile of code and you're like, oh, man.
Pile of code.
Right.
You've kind of already drawn judgment there.
It is, right? Like if you look at something and you can't make heads or tails of it just looking at it, like it's not pretty, you're going to assume that they missed other things, right? Like if they didn't care about how their code looked, then they didn't care about how it operated either.
I've seen lots of piles of code.
Right. Totally. So I thought that was a good way to start it off. Like it truly, just your perception. It's, the whole don't judge a book by its cover type thing, right? I mean, you can't help it. You see a book with a really garbage cover and you're like, man, I bet that's terrible.
But you can judge a book by its many pages.
Yeah, and the book I was talking about is Programming Beyond Practices. It's got a really cute picture of a monkey, and it's 132 pages.
That's really short.
And it's a
And
monkey.
70 pages are the index. And then 30 for the table of contents.
So one of the things that they jumped in is they said teams should adopt formatting rules and follow them. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, that sounds nice in theory.
Totally.
I mean, it really does.
I'm sure you guys work somewhere where there've been like line ending wars where, someone's using a different editor and they don't want to change, because, that's how Linux does it, or that's how Windows does it, or that's what it was before. I didn't even change it, and this stuff goes back and forth. So I think that having standards is really good because sometimes you'll get that one person who just decides to do it their own way.
And honestly, I think that's where pull requests come in. I mean, seriously, if somebody's going to stray that far outside the lines of what the team has adopted, you have the absolute right to destroy their pull request and just deny it, in my opinion.
But this made me question, though, maybe this is more of a thing outside of a C# or a Visual Studio world, right?
Where there's not standards that everybody uses, kind of.
Well, no, I wasn't going there. What I was going with is that because up until, the last, let's say, 24 months, right? If you were going to write in C#, you were more often than not, you were going to be locked into Visual Studio.
Yeah.
So there were the defaults that Visual Studio would apply, and that's what it was, right? So, in regards to things like tabs versus spaces, is one of the other holy wars, right? Whereas take a Java environment, for example, and, you might have one guy who prefers IntelliJ. You might have someone else that prefers Eclipse. And so in those worlds, they actually have, and Visual Studio has this too, but it came out way after, the Java world had this. But they, in their tool chain, have plugins and configurations where you can add in a configuration that the IDE will understand, and it'll enforce those. So like when you hit new line and you tab over, does it insert tabs, or does it insert spaces? How many spaces does it insert for each tab that you press? Things like that. So maybe, I guess where I'm going with this though is this teams should adopt formatting rules and follow them. I've never been in a situation at any employer where we've sat down and we're like, okay, guys, this is how we're going to format our C#, right? That's never happened. I've never had that. But maybe in
JavaScript,
Java world, that would
JavaScript
exist.
in particular, the editor that I use, it changes depending on which computer I'm at, which employer, which project I'm working on. I use multiple different editors.
JavaScript's a good example, but yeah, I don't think we've had that either, though.
There's
Thinking
definitely
back.
been times because some people do their JavaScript in Visual Studio. Some will do it in WebStorm.
I get that there's a lot of JavaScript editors that we could iterate through, but I'm saying I still don't recall having a conversation about hey guys, we're going to standardize on how we're going to format our JavaScript, and here's the configuration for your given tool.
Wait, JavaScript? You mean in a separate file at the top of the page or at the bottom of the page? Is that what we're talking about?
Uh-oh.
That's an old school way of thinking about JavaScript, man. It's come a long way,
right?
In the body and the head.
Oh, the good old days.
Yeah, I don't know. I usually follow the idiomatic type guides for most of them. So C#, the brackets are always on the following line from the method definition. In JavaScript, it's usually on the same line. I usually just follow whatever the practices are. And half the time, it does do it right in the IDE. So
that's what my point was, though, is that's Visual Studio doing that for you because it's just a default, right? And it even has by language defaults too.
Yep.
So,
it might.
So it's
based
making
on
some of
the
those
tooling.
decisions for you.
Yeah.
So I guess my point though is that in his comment about this teams adopting a formatting standard kind of made me think okay, well the teams then sat down, and even I think later at the end of this chapter he mentioned for the given project that he was working on at the time, they spent a whopping 10 minutes, and then a decade later that's still the formatting that they're following.
Yep.
And again, if it's something that you could take the time and there's some kind of tool, some part of your tooling where you could okay, everybody gets this config file, then could see that happening. Because you brought up WebStorm, for example. And I know that WebStorm has it, so what you could do is you could just commit that file as part of the repository, that configuration file as part of the repository. WebStorm will pick it up, and
everybody gets it.
Now everybody can have that, that formatting best practice. But it's just, I don't think this has historically been a thing in a Visual Studio world.
Yeah, probably not. What's interesting is Will, one of the guys that we talk about on occasion, he and I got into...
Oh, wait, this is the guy I heard something about. There was a race.
Yeah, he lost it.
Oh, wait. Dang it.
He wants to race me again ever since that, by the way. That's fine. He was like, man, let me work out for 6 months first, and then I'll race you. So bring it on, dude, whenever you're ready. I'm going to eat some brownies between now and then. But...
I think you're doing it wrong.
But we actually got into a debate over this for an hour one afternoon because he likes to put spaces between his parentheses and his arguments passed into a method. And I was like, no, dude.
Wait, say that again?
So if you are calling a method or a function, and when you open the parentheses, he wanted a space before the first argument, and he wanted a space after the last one. I was like, I can't get behind that, dude. I straight up can't do that. And he's like,
what is that about?
But it's so much easier to read. And I'm like, no, dude, that messes my eyes up. It doesn't.
So
work.
let's say that. Let's give an example here. So we have a customer object that has a method called get first name. Or no, because that would be getting something. And you're saying you had to pass something in.
Well,
right?
Fibonacci
orders.
sequence, and it takes a
Get
number.
orders. Yeah, something.
Okay.
You pass something in. And he would have open paren space, argument, space, close paren. And I hope I'm not butchering this. I'm pretty sure this is what the argument was. And I was like, I can't get behind it. And he's like, no, but there should be space. And I was like, you know what? If that's what you want, then there should be an automated tool that when you check this code in, automatically does it. Because I'm not writing code that looks like that.
Yeah, I agree. I actually hate that, by the way.
I do too. Like, I don't like it.
When I see that, I instantly remove it. And if I don't, formatting tools will do it for me.
And that's what I told him. And it was funny. So, and this isn't a bash on him because, I mean, we all have our things that we like.
Well, not to bash on him. I'm not saying it that way, but there was actually a similar point made here about formatting. Like, if you start doing weird formatting things like that, and I don't want to say it weird, but like there's a later section where they're talking about like block formatting,
Yep.
variable names, and the declaration and the assignment if you're doing like a big group of them, and how you might think that it reads pretty, but it's kind of pointless. And as soon as anyone uses any tool to refactor, then it's immediately going to go away.
Yeah.
So why bother?
And so one of the points that they brought up in the book was automated tools help with the process. So I feel like if there are certain things that you want to enforce, then put it in something that cleanses it when it goes in, right? Like,
yeah, and that's where I was thinking, like with it from a Java world. Man, what was that tool? There was a tool. I want to say it started with a P. It wasn't Python though. It was like a Java tool that you could give it your formatting. Oh, maybe it was actually. That's actually what it was. It was called like Formatter. It was like PH. Man, I'm going to have to go back and look for it.
ReSharper will do this too.
while you're coding, right?
Yeah, and you can actually run it on the whole project.
Oh, nice.
Yep. For a while there, people were basically checking out C# projects on GitHub, running it through the ReSharper formatter, and then submitting a pull request like, here, fixed.
That's ridiculous.
People were getting mad.
I would deny that.
Maybe it wasn't formatter with a PH. There was something like that though, but it was after the fact though. It wasn't.
That's what I'm saying.
This wasn't like Joe mentioned ReSharper, where it would do it in line as you're typing, and
This
it'd be
should
like,
be something everybody gets for free, right? When they check in their code type thing.
It was definitely something that would go and modify your code after the fact, after you've already, which is kind of a scary thing if you think about it. But
on save, like boop.
No, not on save.
Well, this was
when
like
you
on
commit
commit.
to a repo,
Okay.
right? Like in your build process, or when you're committing to your source control place.
But
something in that pipeline. Go ahead.
I will say, we mentioned, we talked about not taking 10 minutes in order to, save 10 years of struggle. But what about when the standards are obviously bad, like the conventions for writing SQL? Imagine if 10 years ago they spent 10 minutes and said, you know what, it just should be capitalized, and that's how we're going to do it. And then for 10 years, people would be writing these screaming snake, horrible looking queries that are screaming into your eyeballs for no reason. Select top one.
I feel like you don't like SQL.
No.
I feel like he's definitely got an opinion there.
But I mean, think about it. If there are really strong opinion conventions, then you're kind of suppressing possible new conventions that might come up. Maybe that is a kind of a false argument because it doesn't really happen that often. But setting standards, setting processes around the way you code does kind of stifle innovation a bit.
It does, but it also makes it where people can jump into it easier. So yeah.
Yeah, but think about like Ruby. Like Ruby looks totally different from any other language, just the way it does like the little underscores, and you can use punctuation. Things like parentheses are optional. These things are all kind of crazy if you're from like a C background, but it really reads pretty nicely, and it's a big influence on later languages.
But in fairness,
see, now I was when you were talking about like reads crazy, I immediately thought of Perl, right? But then you said that it reads nice, and then I was like, oh wait, you're not talking about Perl.
But
Perl
hold on.
doesn't count.
In fairness, Ruby was a brand new language, right? So they had control over what they wanted to do there. So let's say that you created Ruby cool, right? You did that. You can make it look however you wanted. So I think that's different. Like once you're in a language, you should follow its standards for how you do it. I mean, just thinking out loud. But one of the key,
I agree with that though.
yeah.
So going to the SQL that Joe seems to hate, like if you're writing T-SQL, Microsoft has a published recommendation of like this is the, our how we recommend that you should format your SQL. Now, here's what's crazy is we were just saying how Visual Studio has its opinions and, we'll automate some of that for you, right? It'll automatically make some decisions for you, but SQL Server Management Studio does not.
Right.
So you start writing some SQL and it doesn't automatically start reformatting things for you based off of its opinions of what your SQL should look like.
Yep. So one of the key takeaways from this particular opening, though, was code formatting is actually important.
Oh,
it
totally.
matters.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually liked the point that they made that you thought that your first order of business was to make it work, right? But it's really not. You need to communicate effectively what's going to do based off, and the formatting is a good part of that communication, right? And that the readability of your code will have a profound effect on future changes or all changes that'll be made, right?
Yep.
And it'll set the precedent that will continue to affect its maintainability and extensibility.
Yep.
Yeah, rely on you
Very,
right. You
very
read it in like 100 times more frequently.
So then it actually jumps into vertical formatting, and this was kind of interesting. Like they took several popular projects, Java projects, and compared them to kind of get statistics on some of these things. So there was some really cool stuff in here. So one of the things was, what's the max length that a file should be? Right? And they started looking through them. And you guys have heard us whine about, I was working in a file that was 10,000 lines long. It's nearly impossible to work in a file like that unless you split that file into 3 different tabs in your editor. And then that way you can just scroll to various different places and keep certain things in scope. Right?
Oh, man. Yeah, that's just reminded me of something like really disgusting where we found, what was it, like it wasn't a class, it was like a store procedure or something. It was 17,000 lines long. Like, that was disgusting.
It's painful. Like, it's really hard.
You can't possibly keep that track in your head.
No.
The C# debugger used to skip over lines greater than, I think it was 10,000. So if you would set a breakpoint,
really?
it just would not even do it.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Yep.
Was that a feature?
That's Joe's tip of the
lesson.
week. That's Joe's tip of the week. If you want to not have to debug your code, you should just put it all into one giant file so that you can only debug the first 10,000 lines.
That's awesome.
Makes you wonder, like, what else the debugger is skipping. It's like, oh, man, I'm not touching this mess.
Seriously. So one of the things that he pointed out in the book that was kind of interesting was try to keep the max length around 500 lines long. And smaller is better.
Well, yeah.
And
but I kind of wanted to put some context around that, though.
Yep.
Because so there were these different Java projects that Alan mentioned, and the projects were JUnit, Finesse, TestNG, Time and Money, JDepend, Ant, and Tomcat. And so they took the file length distributions of all of these different projects and then try to decipher, okay, like, well, what does this data tell us, right? And so what they came out of was, okay, it's possible to build very significant systems with files that are typically around 200 lines with an upper limit of 500, right? So the point is that you could build a really awesome app, a really full-featured, app or library or whatever. You don't have to go crazy with your file sizes.
Yep. Because they said one of the things that was crazy to me was Tomcat and Ant had files that were several thousand lines long, right? And those are extremely popular Java, libraries or applications, and they said at least half of them were over 200. But then that Finesse one was like most of them were extremely short, and it was also a very big application. And they were saying it's possible to do it. You just have to be aware of it. You have to be cognizant of the fact that you're not going into these crazy file sizes.
Now, in fairness to those open source projects, though, this book was printed like, what did we decide, like 9 years ago, something like that.
It's been a little while ago.
I want to say it was. This says copyright 2009. No, 2000. First printing was 2008. Well, that doesn't sound right either. I thought it was older than that.
So I just looked up Roslyn to see how many lines of code it has.
Well, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, just to finish the thought, though, I was just going to say, like, in fairness to these open source projects, though, they may have changed that by now.
Oh, possibly.
Right?
Yeah.
Although we do know that a lot of times, like, take, old bugs that are found in code that was never, changed, right? It's quite possible that if it still works, and they didn't bother to refactor anything, because why bother? It works. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I was just looking at. I just picked Roslyn kind of randomly and looked at the number of lines of code, and it's 2,355,000. So I just did the math in my calculator and lost it. But it basically ended up being if we kept to under 500, then you would need over 4,700 files, which is it's a bit on the mind.
It is, but it's also easier to navigate file structures, I think, than having to go through that much code in a file. I think.
Yeah, I think so.
So.
Yeah, I mean, it's 2 million lines no matter how you slice it, right?
Exactly. Better organized, right? It's like the difference between throwing a pile of paperwork into a drawer in your desk and then having to go find it later. You're never going to, right? As opposed to throwing it into a bunch of different filing drawers or folders or something.
Oh, man, you just need junk drawer 1, junk drawer 2, junk drawer 3.
And hope you didn't put a knife in the middle of there somewhere when you're reaching for the paper.
Yep. MongoDB, 1 million, basically 1,200,000 lines of code. No, 1,200,000 lines of code. So, yeah, that's quite a few classes there if you divvied things up 500 lines.
Roslyn is more than Mongo?
Yep.
That's shocking.
Yep.
Wow. Cool. So the next thing they said was the newspaper metaphor. Like your file should read sort of like a newspaper.
Yep.
Right?
Here we go.
And this is where Joe's feeling victorious already.
All right, no holds barred.
Yep.
No.
So your headlines are up at the top, and then you get more detailed as you go down.
All right.
And this, by the way, before this war starts, actually it's not going to be a war because I think Joe has the author on his side here.
Oh, he can have the author on his side. He's still lost.
Not just the author, Uncle Bob.
Uncle Bob on his
Good.
side.
That's fine. Whatever.
But this is just the first part, this whole reading like a newspaper. Then we get into the other sections that
We'll get to that.
Get about. So, yeah.
Here's the thing. Okay, so we talked about this a little bit in a previous episode where we had talked about basically the newspaper metaphor was to have your methods sorted so that the caller is above the callee. So if you have method 1 calls method 2, then method 2 is sorted below that, right? And you continue formatting all of your methods like that to where the caller is always above the callee, right? But and they were referring to it as this newspaper metaphor, right? And the problem that I have with this is that it sounds great in this utopian universe where you write this thing the first time and you write it in this format and fine, everything's being called one time, right? But we don't read code like we do a news story or a newspaper, right? So when you read a news article or any story, you read it linearly from top to bottom. There's no need to go back to a previous paragraph, assuming you were paying attention the first time, right? So there's no need to go back. However, with code, our intent is reusability, okay? So skipping around within a file is a thing within code that is not a thing within a newspaper, right? And we don't necessarily read our code linearly the same way that we would a newspaper, assuming that our methods are used more than once, which, oh, by the way, that's part of the reason why they're supposed to be, separate, is so that you can increase the reusability. So I get that you're going to take issue with that, right? You can be like, no, definitely, because I had mentioned, well, if trying to sort them by caller versus callee is just one arbitrary method, then why not just do it alphabetically? Because if they're both going to be arbitrary, at least from a readability point of view, it's a lot easier for me to go to find that other method that I'm looking for, depending in the editor that I'm in. Because if I know that the methods are in alphabetical order, then I know how to scroll up. I know whether or not I need to scroll up or down to find the next method. And I know Alan was saying, oh, but in my tool, I can just F12 that. And that's very true in a C# world. But what if I'm in JavaScript, for example, and I'm in some other editor, or maybe I'm not even in an IDE, but just literally raw text, right? Then I don't have those tools, right, at my disposal. So if I just have it to where I can reason about that, oh, okay, these are in alphabetical order, let me just scroll up to find that, then fine. Now the argument is going to come in, oh, but if you refactor that and you change its name, then it's going to be out of order. So then what do you do? And I get it. And I said, even at the time that this originally came up, I don't even have a good answer for that. I'm not even going to try to deny that that's a thing, right? And sadly, but at least, if you really wanted to be particular about it, then, you could, we talked about the idea of the two pull request idea. The first pull request is you fix the bug, right? And then the second pull request builds off of the first one. And the second pull request is, any kind of code cleanup stuff, so that way whoever's reviewing your pull request sees the cleanup separate from the bug fix, right? So maybe that's the answer to keeping these things in order if you really wanted to. But, because the other thing one of the huge problems that I have with this newspaper thing, metaphor, is that it's so inconsistent. Like what if, okay, because I know I can see Joe's like chomping at the bit.
I'm dying over here.
Ready. What if in the scenario you have a class that, let's say maybe you just have some kind of utility class, right? Some kind of class that's meant for the rest of your library. And maybe it doesn't call anything. It just has a bunch of static methods, right? What order do you put those in? It has methods that are
Well, that's
that
an
it's not
anti-pattern
using
already.
Okay, fine. Whatever you want to call it. You are more than welcome to call it that. But this is the real world example where we've each done it. We've each seen it done. So it's a thing. What's the answer?
Oh, we're not talking about real world, man. We're talking about clean code. This is how things should be. I should go into a class. I should see the one public method that's in there. I should see it broken down into little sub methods that do, different hierarchical things like fetching the data, performing some operations, and maybe formatting. And I can skip into whichever one I want to, see what's going on because it should be organized well. And
so fine. So you want to go back to this utopian example.
Yes.
All right. And not live in a real world example. So now I'm going to blow your mind. What about unit tests then? Because in a unit test is exactly what I just described. It's a class that has a bunch of methods that should not be calling each other.
They actually answer that. So they did.
No, they didn't.
Yeah, they did. So actually, if we skip down a little bit, they have what's called conceptual affinity. And basically, if you are using the same type of methods, those should be grouped together. So if you don't have the flow in the newspaper format, like what you were talking about.
Yeah. Okay.
So that is where you do your unit test. Now, going back, so I actually
hold on, wait. I wanted to say that's a good point about the conceptual affinity because I hadn't applied that to unit tests, but they still don't say what order they should be in within that.
They should just be grouped together. They should be proximity.
So now now you have a class of 50 unit tests.
Right. They should be close.
They're just randomly. Yeah, they're all close together because they're testing the same thing.
No, not testing the same thing.
They're testing the same class.
If they're testing the same class, so they might be testing different functions in that class or different methods in that class. The ones that are testing those methods.
Let's say you have 50 unit tests for one method in a class.
Okay, then they're just going to be. Who cares what order they're in?
Okay, so they're randomly sorted, is what you're saying. It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, I think that's horrible. Like that's.
I feel like the alphabetizing is useless in it because you said, what if you don't have an editor? I feel like that's a cop-out thing because honestly, other than looking in Get Online, when are you not going to open up code in an editor? Seriously.
Okay, but just because you're in an editor does not mean that you have the capability of zooming around through functions, though.
No, but I mean, how's that any different one way or the other? Like, I don't care. You can do Control F and find the method name. Like, I guess my point with that is like,
Well, then that's even. I mean, still, then that's.
I'm not going to search. I'm not even going to scan up and down a file. I'm always going to do Control F and try and find generally what I'm looking for. I mean, almost every developer I've ever seen does the same thing. Like, we don't want to scroll around. We think it's about 2/3 of the way up. No, nobody does that. We do a Control F. We find it, regardless whether you're in Notepad or in Get Online or whatever. So, but going back to the static method thing, so I actually have a feeling on this one. Like, the affinity rule there sort of applies to me. If you have a static class that only has static methods in it, I would feel like, okay, if there's a bunch of things all doing something similar, they should be close together. Like you said, they don't operate off each other, but they all go together. The alphabetizing thing just never has done it for me. Like, even the newspaper flow thing, I just do it by nature. That's kind of how I do it. Now, if I'm adding something to a static class, I'm definitely guilty of just adding a method to the bottom, because I'm not going to go through and look at the other 50 in there. But I'm not actually going to order anything.
All right. Well, let me let Joe have a chance.
Oh, yeah.
Or
I was just thinking, like when you're like, say you're working with somebody, you're doing a little bit of pair programming, you're debugging an issue, you're looking at the method, and you're like, something's not right here. The natural inclination is to scroll up and let me see what happened. Or you want to see what happens next, so you scroll down. To me, it's just a natural evolution, and I think most programmers just kind of end up doing that anyway. And it just hurts my soul to think about a private method being the first thing I see when I open up the function or open up a class. And that even counts for constructors. Like, to me, I want to see the constructors up at the top. And so I don't like the idea that there's methods that some are in alphabetical order and some aren't. And it just, I feel like that just kind of falls apart. So I do think it's good for like static classes, stuff like that, unit tests. Like, if there's no other way to sort them, then yeah, you might as well alphabetically do it.
Okay, but going back to the newspaper example, this is another one of the issues that I have with it, is that because I felt like this was one of the inconsistencies of the book, right? Was that we just talked about the idea of the block formatting, the variables and you mentioned the spaces before your argument list and after your argument list as in your parentheses for your method call, and that like doing either one of the things, it's like, well, why bother? Because the book specifically talked about the block formatting for your variable declarations. Like, why bother? Because any refactoring tool is automatically going to go away with that, right? Or tools that could do refactoring. And guess what? Those same tools, they will blow away your newspaper metaphor as well. So why bother to do the newspaper metaphor? No tool supports the newspaper metaphor. But, even the clean code, even the code made that you talked about will sort it. We'll sort it different.
But hold up, the block formatting wasn't what he said. Wasn't that formatters would blow it away? The reason he said not to do the block formatting on your variable declarations was because it detracts from the meaning of the file.
Yeah. That was part of it. But like later on in that section, it was kind of like oh hey, by the way. Automatic. Here's the sentence. To make matters worse, automatic reformatting tools usually eliminate this kind of alignment. So he was making the point that why bother, right? It's meaningless. It's going to be done away with if you run it through any kind of an automatic formatter. So you're right. You're absolutely right. That was the main point that he was getting at. Is like, hey, you're emphasizing the wrong thing, right? You got the wrong emphasis on the wrong syllable, right? But also part two of that was that, well, it's going to be done away with in part of a refactoring tool. And so that's my point. It's like, this feels inconsistent, because if you start using refactoring tools too, or any kind of cleanup tools too, then you lose that newspaper metaphor.
But generally speaking, I don't think it's a great practice to just go run reformatting tools on your code anyways, right? Like, because that's, again, going back to what we talked about before, when you're using source control, it really confuses things, right? Like, all of a sudden your methods all got rearranged. So now you can't even make heads or tails. You're looking at a pull request and you're like, I don't know what changed here. So I don't really like that. I would rather you physically go in and make the modifications that you want if you're trying to clean up a file. I mean, we've seen some really bad code bases to where maybe you just run the formatter on the entire thing before you ever get started. Possibly.
I'm not saying I've ever done that.
Right.
And I'm also, I don't recall ever. I mean, I probably have, knowing how particular I am, I've probably changed the order of something, but I don't recall doing that. So
Specifically,
I don't have like a for instance where I've submit, so I'm not like that crazy about this, but I'm just saying that, this newspaper metaphor just seemed like this unicorn. It's this utopian example that I'm like, oh, come on. That's not real world, man.
I totally do it. I mean, I definitely do. And I'm not even being facetious.
Don't.
Absolutely. Like if you look through my files, they absolutely do that.
Yeah, I always have my constructor at the top and my properties, and I've got my public methods right at the top, and then everything else kind of.
Here's
flows
another
out of
problem
those.
with the newspaper metaphor is that not all languages will even support this. Some languages
true.
the method has to be defined before it can be called. So it's like, this isn't even
Right.
depending on your environment. Now, granted, those are probably, you're probably like, wait, who's still writing in Pascal?
I
Man,
mean,
header files. Come on.
Yeah, seriously. Like, okay, you could take that argument, but you can always change anything for that. But I would say, generally speaking, like if I can, I try and do a flow of, it starts here, then it goes here, then it goes here. I definitely try and do that. I'm not saying I'm perfect at it, but for the most part, I want to be able to visually follow what's happening.
So I think, because I think where you might be thinking of is you're talking about like code where you're the original author, you're starting on it, so it's greenfield.
Totally.
But that's not the case if it's new stuff. And in fact, you even in the previous episode said, nope, I just throw it at the bottom.
And I even said it a minute ago. I will, like if I go into a static file that is static methods and static class or whatever, I'll just put it at the bottom.
No. Okay,
Like
fine.
web
It doesn't have to
API
be
or something,
static
right?
methods. It doesn't have to be
totally.
static.
Like a web API thing, I will literally throw the controller at the bottom because I'm not wanting to jack up anybody else's source control looking stuff when they're going into their pull request, and it's not relevant to anything else on the page. So I will put and I've done it on stuff that I've changed or added to that you've had, where literally I stuck it at the bottom, and you were like, oh, but I had them in alpha, and I was like,
All I'm saying is that that it seems like it's if one is they both seem equally arbitrary to me. And if your whole point for going with the newspaper metaphor is readability, then my argument is that, well, if that's your concern, then from a consistency point of view, alphabetical should win, because no matter what the caller situation is, alphabetical can still be alphabetical, whereas newspaper can't. And then there's other weird scenarios where that and we talked about this in the Slack channel, where let's say you have one method that gets called by three others, right? And you could get into this weird chain, this weird call chain where that method is at the very bottom of the file, and yet the first caller to it may be, let's say it's a 500 line file because they said that was about the max-ish, right? So it's 450 lines up. Right. But because of this weird call chain, there's other methods that are using it because, again, the whole reason for it being in a method is to make it reusable. Right. So then it's like this newspaper metaphor starts to fall apart. It sounds nice for certain situations, but then you start running it through its paces in real world scenarios. And you're like, yeah, it doesn't apply here. Right?
Yeah, you'll always have edge cases, but I don't
edge?
know. For the most part, I think that it works out pretty well. Like, I mean, so here's the thing. Are you going to sort all your methods alpha, even if they're private or public? You're going to mix them together? I mean, because if you had a formatting tool, who knows what it's going to do, right? Like, so
it could keep the privates, and you could keep them together by accessor. And we talked about that. I'm cool with that too.
I'm just saying.
I actually do that.
In most cases,
I keep my public stuff at the top and private stuff towards the bottom.
So going back, if you're refactoring something, like if you're going in and you're having to inject something into the flow, typically I will also try and do that in newspaper style. Now, like I said, if it's a web API call or something that's literally just another static method in a file, I just throw it at the bottom because I don't care. Like, I know nothing else relies on it. It doesn't rely on anything else, so it's there, right? But if I'm trying to, if there's a flow that I know that has to happen, then I do try and keep it somewhere in the mix, right? So that it's easy to follow. I get what you're saying. if they're arbitrary, then the alphabet should win. The alphabetizing one should. But I don't feel like they're that arbitrary.
Well,
Well, it
I
sounds
guess
like
what
we-
I'm saying that. Sorry, Joe.
I was just saying, it sounds like they both have their place, and you just got to kind of take it with a grain of salt and make the right decision for your code base.
Well, I guess my point though is that if consistency is king, because we've talked about this before, right? As it relates to this book, right? Is that consistency in your formatting, consistency in your naming. If you're gonna call something a controller, then it should be it should live up to what we think of when we think of like a view model controller. And then like if you're gonna name things that mean things to developers like a visitor, then it needs to live up to the visitor pattern. Consistency is king, right? And with the newspaper metaphor, I feel like there are not just edge cases, but a lot of scenarios that are not edge, okay? That the newspaper metaphor starts to fall apart, right? And that's why I'm saying, like, okay, if you have to pick some arbitrary way to sort your file, to sort your stuff, fine. I would rather you just be full on random, right? And just say, you know what? It's 2016. Just Command F and find it, right? Or, if your IDE has a, F12 or Command B or whatever, right? Whatever your IDE has to navigate year round, fine, just complete random. But if you're trying to tell me to format, to particularly list them in a particular way, then I feel like alpha should be the one, because that's the only one that can be consistent every time for every situation, no matter what.
Unless you have constructors, properties, or public-private protected methods.
No, you can. Why can't you alphabetize those?
Because I will deny a pull request if you got privates at the top. Come on, that's terrible. If you have your properties mixed in with methods, come on.
No. I mean, you can definitely put. We talked about like having your publics above your privates and things like that, or I mean, we've talked about that before.
Yeah, but now
Right,
you're
so
starting to make
that's
these cases to deal with, edge cases that aren't such edge cases. These are really common things. We're talking about putting regions now and banners in there.
No, I didn't talk about anything about regions and banners.
It's basically the
I
same
didn't
thing,
say
except you're
anything about
just
the same.
getting rid of the dividers. We're separating code that is logically meant
No,
to
because
be grouped together.
because the formatters can group by accessor level, all your publics together and all your privates together, right? Like that's already a thing that can be done.
I don't know, man. I like the newspaper thing. But I don't think we're going to come to
I
a
get that
consensus
people
on
like it.
this.
I just feel like it's a unicorn, and it'll work great on your first iteration of your greenfield application, but 5 years from now, when that thing's brownfield and you come back to it, it is not going to be in a newspaper metaphor format any longer.
Yeah, maybe not.
And that's the real world.
Well, same with alphabetical. How many times have you seen a file that's 90% alphabetical and then a year later it's like 56% alphabetical because people just add to the bottom?
Again, like I said, then yeah, but fine, then go full random. But if you're going to tell me to put it in a particular way, you can't tell me that newspaper is the one that's going to win every use case. Every
No,
scenario.
I'm not saying that though.
I feel like it falls apart.
You got to make the right
All right.
decision that's right for your case. But yeah, we could totally do this all night, so we should probably head on, and I'm right.
All right. Well, wait, what?
So Joe's right. All right. So
No.
moving on to the next part. It's like there were some other things in here other than just the ordering of things. And one of them was like separating concept with blank lines. I'm a huge fan of this. Like if you've got a section of code doing so, these two really go hand in hand. There was the separate concept with blank lines, and they keep closely associated code grouped together, so it was very dense. So that when you're just scanning a page of code, you see a line break and you see, hey, this is the next logical thing that happens after it, right? I love that.
Yep. Same. Yeah, I'll do that a lot. I'd say like var something equals get something, and the next line I use it. So something dot do something. And it's so nice to have those with no line separation in between. But if you go on and use the next variable after that, it's unrelated, you should definitely have a space in there.
Yep. And it's real easy to see. And in the book, they gave several examples and showed the difference between, poorly formatted code with no lines or ones that were all blocked or whatever. And it definitely makes it harder for your mind to just quickly adjust to what's going on. Another thing that they had was, and we talked about this in one of the previous chapters, I believe, is variable declarations to be as close to the usage as possible. And if the method isn't too long, then that means it should also be at the top of the method. So,
Yeah, that's a little weird with JavaScript and hoisting, and JavaScript is so
Yeah.
popular now. But no,
Well-
I really like this too.
Yeah, I was actually going to mention that too, especially pre, the current, was it ECMAScript 6, 2016?
Yep.
Or no,
Yeah,
ECMAScript
using
5.
the let method.
I forget what that. Well, yeah, now with the let, you can place it everywhere. But before, as Joe mentioned, with the hoisting, the idea was really it's the compiler, the JavaScript compiler was going to put it all at the top, so you should too, because that's really technically what's happening. And you're just lying to yourself if you mix it in elsewhere.
Yep. So that was for a long time. That was like the standard device is for JavaScript, put the vars at the top.
And that's the way it was at the time that this book was written. So do you feel like that he's just kind of like spitting in the face of JavaScript and be like,
No, because
put it in line with where it's as close to its usage as possible, and who cares? Let the compiler do its thing and don't worry about it.
well, not really, because he also says down below that control variables for loops should be defined within the loop. So that's kind of a similar thing. Like you could have always done var I equal something in your loop. Now, granted, if you had I defined up above it, it was going to kill it. It was going to stomp all over it. But, at least it was being defined within the loop. So,
I don't know what you mean by the stomping all over it, right? It would still there would still only be the one I. So yeah, even though you tried to double declare it, it's not going to blow up.
you walked all over it.
You're only going to have the one assignment at that time.
That it jacked it
Right.
up. Yeah.
You
Whatever
change
its
it.
assignment was in the beginning would remain that until you got to that loop.
Yep.
But so I mean, like kind of like what Joe was pointing out there, I kind of questioned, was it that maybe at this time he wasn't like really a JavaScript guy, didn't care about JavaScript, or just didn't like that JavaScript for standards were kind of like, hey, declare all your variables first at the top of your
2008.
file.
They're like, oh man, this web's never going to take off. Everything's going to be applets and DirectX.
Well, back in the day, you also couldn't do the same thing with like C#, right? Like you couldn't put you didn't really have an anonymous function or a lambda or whatever, so you couldn't really define the same variable twice. So, I mean, when this was written, it was basically if you had done I at the top and you did I in a loop down below, it was going to blow up. So,
You totally lost me. What?
So kind of what he's talking about is when you define your variable up at the top, right? Or when we said in a loop, if you define your variable in a loop and you varred the same var that was already done above it, really you're just reusing the same variable, is what we said. However, using the let in JavaScript is similar to what you could do in C# if you had a lambda or some anonymous function and you define the same variable within that function. So that what I'm getting at is you can do similar things now. I don't know that those were necessarily available back when this was written.
Well, no, let definitely wasn't. So that's exactly my point.
Or anonymous methods in C#, right? I don't think you could have done that either, is what I'm saying. Like, you couldn't have done a for each.
Well, you could definitely do for loops.
Not a for loop.
For each
So
in C# in 2008.
would you have stomped all over the variable if you used the same definition in your for each? You would have, right?
You couldn't have done the var. You wouldn't have
Right.
been able to redefine it.
That's what I'm saying. It would have broken. Like, you would have.
But you were
messed
saying
it up.
anonymous method, though.
If you take an enumeration, a list, and you do a for each on it, like using the lambda.
So for each var my string in list of strings.
Then it would actually closure that type thing, right? So you wouldn't be stomping over my string outside it, I don't think. Or does it still blow up? It might still. I'd actually have to code it. But what I'm saying is I don't think these type of things were around back then, so he couldn't have really, there was nothing else he could have said about it that would have made much sense. But I would have to code that C# thing out to see if it would actually break. I mean, it might just blow up in the compiler.
I think, yeah. So I got lost somewhere in that. But okay.
So there were only two more to close out this section. One was instance variable should be declared at the top of the class. Totally agree with that. By the way, they call those fields in Visual Studio. I don't know why. I don't like that.
I
that was it.
don't do that sometimes. There's been a few times when I've put the field, like if there's some sort of method that deals specifically with a property, but I can't really remember why I would do something like that. I just know that I've done it before. So it's probably me doing something I shouldn't do and wanting to keep my shame, as close together as possible and alienated from the rest of the code.
Yeah, I definitely like them at the top because then you can just go look, like you were talking about earlier with the private, or your getters and setters. Like I want those in one place, like that kind of stuff.
That's what I was thinking. If I have a field that's specific for a property, then I'll go ahead and put that field right above the property rather than a separate section for fields and properties.
Oh, me too. I do that.
Yeah, I'm bad about that too. And
I don't think that's bad. I think that's clean.
Well, this is where I say it's bad is that if we're going back to, if a reformatting tool or refactoring or whatever was to come in, then it's going to totally blow that away. And even related to summary documentation, summary documentation would put in spacing between that as well in the case of, a public API scenario. So, so bad in that sense. But I do feel like this is one of those acceptable times where it's like, okay, because these things, going back to, what did you refer to it? The something with a C word.
Conceptual affinity?
Yes, the conceptual affinity. Because they relate, then I'll put them together. But, he talks about, instance variables declared at the top, but variable declarations, as you mentioned before, inside of your function should be declared as close as possible. So, it's kind of like a difference there, right? Because, if you do have some instance variables that are only used in a couple functions, right? Like how are you going to do that, right? You can't have it declared twice. So rather than picking one, you just put it at the top.
Yeah.
Yep. So, dear listeners, it's now time for us to beg you for reviews. And we do this because they're really important for us. They help us find new listeners, and pretty much actually the only way we find new listeners. So it's really big. iTunes, Stitcher, wherever else you can find. But those are kind of the two big ones, particularly iTunes, because we get a huge percentage of our listeners from iTunes. So it's really big. I know it's a big pain in the butt. Just interacting with iTunes in general is a big pain in the butt. So we really appreciate everyone who's done it. And if you haven't already, then, we would love that too. So please consider it. And thank you.
And how can they do that, Joe?
If you go to codingblocks.net/review.
Boom. There it is. Yes.
All right. So it's my favorite section of the show, Survey Says. So in our last episode, Survey Says. All right. So in our last episode, we talked about stickers because we've got Coding Block stickers now. And if you would like one, send us a self-addressed stamped envelope. And you're like, but where do I send that, Michael? So hit us up on DM us on Twitter, or if you're in our Slack channel, or you want to send an email, send us an email and comments at codingblocks.net, and we will send you a sticker or more to the address of your choosing. But since stickers are now a thing, I'm of the opinion that I like to have stickers on my laptop because, my opinion is, hey, this Mac is got this nice metal casing on it that, you can't tear off with a sticker. So let me put a sticker on it, because then if I don't like it, I can easily just take it off and you'll never know it was there, right? So the question is, do you put stickers on your laptop? Now, Alan, you're not over there cheating, are you?
I have not looked at this. I already know the answer.
What?
I have not looked at any of them.
All right. So your choices are, no, I've got class and I'm an adult. Stickers are for kids. Or your other choice is stickers! Stickers are the things! All right. And you got to say it like really excited like that. All right. So, Alan and Joe, let's see. I think Joe might have gone first last time.
He did.
All right. Alan?
65% no stickers. I got class. Peace out.
65%. All right, Joe.
I was going to say 60%.
What do you think it is?
So I'm going to go 66.
66%?
Yeah.
For which one?
No stickers.
Come on down.
Both of you? Wait, Joe.
I've been to
All
conferences,
right,
man. It's mostly not stickers.
It's
Especially
all
with
shiny, man.
people's work laptops.
Yeah,
What?
dude. Yeah.
No, it's mostly stickers at the conferences. You're,
I don't know
Going
what
to the
kind of
wrong
crazy,
conference.
kid conferences you're going to.
well, I'm going to the sticker conferences.
You're going to those hipster conferences.
Oh, that must be what it is.
All right, so don't leave us hanging here. What do we
Well,
got?
by Price is Right rules, you both lose.
Oh, we went over.
Yeah, I was gonna say you've been to the most conferences of anyone I know this year, so I should have trusted your hints.
Yeah, man, stickers. Why would you not?
There's no way they were more than 50%.
Why would you not pick stickers?
No way.
Definitely stickers are on laptops. That's totally a thing.
What was the percentages?
I mean, even in our own work environments, you see more stickers on laptops than not.
I need the percentages.
All right. So, but the no's won.
Yeah, I told you. What was it? 55%.
64.
No, it was 62%.
I was going to say 60, but Alan ruined it.
Yeah. Well, that's when you should have just said like 1%, Joe, and that way,
Man, I was just trying to prove a point. I knew that most people don't want stickers on their
I
stuff.
can't believe that.
Dude,
That is mind-boggling.
I have 2 on mine, and it's only because I love them both. It has nothing to do with the fact that I wanted stickers on my laptop.
That is insane.
I did not want any, but those needed to be there.
No, this is, you know what? there should have been like more classifications, like, no, because I'm really old, or no, because I'm really boring, or because like, why? I feel like the fun people were like, oh yeah, I want stickers on my laptop, and like, boring people are like, no.
I feel like people that put stickers on things are trying to hold things together or cover up holes.
Yeah, I put stickers on things, just not on my laptop.
Yeah, man. And somebody asked about cars today, like, what do you feel about bumper stickers on cars? And I'm like, man, that's even worse than a laptop. No.
I'm trying to think, if I was like a samurai, would I put a sticker on my katana? My instrument of death? No.
No.
Now I'm with you on the car.
My katana.
I don't have stickers on my car, and so I'm with you on that. That's not to say that I never have, but yeah, definitely not in recent years. I definitely haven't.
Hey, by the way, for all of everybody that's gotten stickers, definitely tweet us a picture of it when you've stuck it on something or when you get the note in the mail, because it's fun. We're getting a lot of them. People seem to be excited about it, and so it makes us excited.
Yeah, I want to see some stickers on some laptops so that Alan and Joe will be like, "Oh, Michael was right. That does look good."
No, man, I actually took one of the stickers and stuck it on the back of my phone case. Now, I'm down with that because that case is disposable, right?
See, this is where you did it wrong. You should have put the sticker on the phone.
No, man.
Because the case was clear. So for those who don't get to see Alan's phone, it's in a clear case. If he had put the sticker on the phone, then the sticker would always be perfect, and the case would make it look shiny.
But then I would have sticker residue on my phone when I pulled it off. I can't have all that.
What if? Okay, now here's a thought. What if you hadn't stuck the sticker on the phone? You just placed it in between the phone and the case.
Then it would
slide
move
around.
It would, it wouldn't be straight.
it wouldn't.
Dude, that would drive me crazy. I couldn't take it.
I
can
like
take
low
this,
maintenance,
but-
man. It's
Same here.
particularly things that thrive on negligence.
And yet you have dogs and cats.
Oh
know
yeah,
how that
maybe that's
works out.
why I want to simplify so badly anything that I can. These little monsters.
Oh, that's awesome.
Well, all right. Well, we had talked about setting up a survey for this one.
We totally didn't, did we?
Yeah,
Oh,
I know
no, I
Joe
got-
threw out some ideas
one?
though.
Okay.
Yeah, you guys didn't like my survey ideas.
I don't think I heard it.
Okay, well, you want to hear one right now?
Please do. Throw it out. This is what it's going to be.
All right, so the new MacBooks, right? They've got this little smart bar in place of the function keys.
Oh, the track
escape-
bar.
Yeah, the track bar. So is this the death of the MacBook Pro as the primo dev laptop? Or, is this just how it's going to be and it's still going to reign supreme?
The beginning of a new awesome era.
Yep.
The future of the changing keyboard or type surface.
Yep, because I really do think like if you go to a conference now, I mean, you probably see like at least 60% MacBook Pros, right?
Yep.
Right.
It's very common, especially like Microsoft, not so much. But if you go to like a JavaScript conference, forget about it. Ruby on Rails, definitely. Like, don't even think about it. But I wonder whether it's going to be like a few years from now. It's going to take some time to kind of phase things in, but. Yeah, I'm kind of worried about it. I love my MacBook Pro, but there's no way I'm giving up my function keys.
Yeah, same here, dude. I'm not excited about this at all. Like, it really has me debating a Surface Book and seeing if I can Hackintosh that baby at some point.
I don't know why you'd want to bother.
I really like OS X or Sierra or whatever you want to call it.
Well, now it's Mac OS.
Yeah, Mac OS. I really like it, man. I really do, but this really bugs me. I hate the direction that.
But I mean, if you were going to take the time to buy a Surface, just leave it with Windows 10.
I want them both.
Well, that's why you have the anniversary update 1607. Install your Bash, the Windows subsystem for Linux.
I like Mac, man. I really like the OS. So that's why. I mean, that's.
But
why I've
the
got
things
my
that you like about it, I think you're going to be frustrated with that Hackintosh.
Possibly, yeah. I've heard. So yeah. At any rate, that's. I am curious what the outcome of this will be. I have a feeling I know which way this is going to go, especially with a bunch of developers. But we'll see.
Yeah, have you seen ads for it where it's got like they're checking the email and there's like the bright red send button or something? Why don't you just hit enter? Like I don't need that.
Yeah, Command Enter done.
I guess you know how I'm voting.
Or you could have multiple screens to look at now. So that you could see the waveform on one surface and the actual video or audio on the other surface.
Yeah, that's why I have two monitors.
Yeah. Although speaking of editing audio, then made me think about what was the new? We're off topic, but the new editor that Adobe is coming out with. What was that thing called?
Oh yeah, that's pretty cool.
Where it could replace. You could replace audio that hadn't even been spoken. So basically the idea was a lot of people have probably edited audio at some point, and you've seen this waveform of the representing the voices, right? And it gives you kind of like a visual cue of like what's where, and you could use to edit it. But Adobe took that concept a step further, and they said, hey, well, what if we also transcribed what was actually said so that you could actually read the words there, right? And what if instead of moving the waveform around, instead if you were to just like copy the cut the words and reorder the words around, and then that way it would reorder the corresponding waveform with it, right? So in the example that they gave, this guy says something to the effect of, before I went to bed, I kissed my dog and my wife. And everyone laughed, and I was like, oh, he probably meant to kiss his wife first, so let's change that. So they just select the word wife that was transcribed and cut it, and then paste it in front of dog, and reorder dog and wife, and and the software fixed that.
That's cool.
And then he was like, well, what if we just want to change this to where he just says he kissed his dog. So they take out the part about him kissing the wife altogether, and it sounds, you listen to the audio, it sounds great, and then he's like, oh, well, what if we want to like add text to it? Like, he didn't say that he kissed the dog, how many times he kissed it, but what if we said, and I kissed my dog 3 times? And so they start typing in new words, and based off of the audio that it already knew, right, it was able to make new waveforms that matched the previous spoken things that person had said, right? And so then the final product was, and before I went to bed I kissed my dog 3 times, and actually they changed it to and I kissed Jordan 3 times, if I remember that.
That's amazing.
So they basically completely changed the what was being said. It was a really neat presentation, but it really made you think about the future of being able to edit podcasts. So maybe in the future, like, we'll just be able to type this out and we won't even have to record it. We'll just type it into some Adobe product, and away it goes.
Yeah, there's some TV show where they were making new episodes of Seinfeld by splicing together old ones. What show is that? I can't remember now, but
I bet that's awesome.
Yeah,
that would be
kind of
great,
idea.
because I think the world needs more Seinfeld. So that sounds fantastic.
Yeah, I think in the show, the real Seinfeld was upset about it. He's like, oh, come on, not making any money.
All right, so I guess we got to get back into this stuff, right?
Yep.
And before we go on to horizontal formatting, though, there was one section where talking about the vertical distance, that he says that we want to avoid forcing our readers to hop around through our source files and classes, right? And I get the want part of that sentence, but
I feel like he's not letting this one go.
No. Why you gotta hate? Don't be like that. But I even wrote this note. I'm like, man, maybe I've just had bad luck. Okay, maybe that's my thing. Maybe I haven't had the good fortune of working in these utopian code bases, because he says that we want to avoid forcing our readers to hop around, but I'm like, man, that has just been inevitable in my career. Like, it's just like you're going to bounce around. Like, that's just going to happen, man.
Yeah, sometimes I wonder, people listen to the podcast and they hear us talk about, the way you quote unquote should do things. They're like, oh man, the place I'm at sucks so bad. None of this stuff applies. It's like, no, man, we're talking about very pie in the sky, like how we think things should be someday when we finish all our tickets and have no more client demands and get all the time in the world to just make clean, pure code.
That is true.
Yeah, I mean, this is the direction we want to go, right? This is what we want to strive to be. This is the things that we want to think about when we're writing new code, but this is not very practical stuff.
Yeah, we definitely strive to put things in alphabetical order, but then... oh, wait. Oh, sorry. I wouldn't messed it up. All right, cool. So let's get into horizontal.
Yes, let's do this. So how wide should a line be? Anybody? Any takers?
I know I've hated it when I've run formatters and it's like bump stuff after 80. And so I've got all these like strings broken in half. So I'm not a big fan of doing this. And I feel like most of the time when things go over the horizontal width, it's usually because it's some sort of, messaging or string or something that I don't really even care about. Anyway, it's not really code to me. It's data. And you can say that, maybe that data should be broken out. But for the most part, the horizontal formatting thing is just not a big deal to me. I would much rather just have that stuff be scrollable if it's a string.
Okay, but like, are you going to make it 1,000 characters wide? Like, where do you stop?
That I don't care if it's 1,000. If you want to put like a big paragraph in a string, in code, I don't really care.
Okay, let's take out the hard coded string examples though, and let's just say it's like pure code. Like you're doing some method chaining.
Yeah, don't do that. Yeah, if it's like dot.
How wide do you go?
No more than 2 methods in a row.
Okay, well.
So, dot something parentheses, dot something else parentheses. Like anything longer than that, you should have each one on its own line.
So you're talking maybe 60 characters.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow, that's even shorter than... That's like really short then.
Have you seen some of my method names?
Well, so here was a stat. Well, here was a stat from the book that was kind of interesting. Was in the popular projects examined, it appeared that 40% of lines were between 20 and 60 characters.
Yeah, but I feel like that's between 20 and 60 characters because they were already going to be, not because they were... how did you just word that? Where
it's data. Well, data's different, right? Like that's not code. That's literally just a representation of some information in there. You're not doing anything.
I mean, yeah, because for so long, 80, which is really a very dated number, but for so long, 80 has been the thing, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. Like it was, their percentage came out to be 20 and 60. Between 20 and 60, not because they didn't want to go out to 80.
No, it had nothing to do with that. This was just examining
that's
what
how
they
it,
found.
like, percentage-wise worked out.
Yep, so
that was the popular one.
70% of all the lines were under 60 characters is what it boiled down to, which was a little surprising. And really,
how can 40%
was between 20 and 60, and then below 20
and 70, you said 70 was below 60.
No, 70% of all lines are under 60. So 30% of lines were less than 10 characters. So if you combine the 30 and the 40%, you're at 70. But
I got you.
So that said, I mean, it already looks like just by default most of them were pretty short anyways.
So is that 30% then for the less than 20? You got to believe, like, is that just because it was one line for a
var I equals 0
or curly brace? The beginning of a curly brace, beginning or end of a method for a curly brace.
Good call.
Or parentheses or something like that.
Could be, yeah. I mean, I'm sure they just did a static analysis of it.
Yeah.
And Uncle Bob Martin basically said that if you're going over 120, then you've kind of gone overboard. I would agree with Joe. If it's just a string, whatever, who cares? If it's data and it's not code, then it's not a big deal. But yeah, if you've got an actual line of code that's over 120 characters, you're probably pushing the limit.
So I tried to think of an example sentence that we can kind of figure out where 80 characters is exactly. So I tried to think of the most iconic, kind of words I could think of. I thought maybe about the Constitution or something. Well, what I ended up with was Bohemian Rhapsody.
Oh.
So 80 characters is this the real life? Is this just fantasy?
No. You got to sing this.
It's very high pitched.
We're listening.
It's just fantasy. Caught in a landslide, no escape. That's where it ends.
No escape? That was it?
No escape from the F. That's 80 characters.
Nice.
If you wanted 120.
Wait, even better. I think Joe owes it to the audience. Joe, you should restate that Bohemian Rhapsody verse, but do an impression of me doing it.
Okay, I can do that. I'll get back from the mic a little bit so I don't blow out your speakers with my awesomeness.
I can do that, he says.
All right, I'm going to stop at 120 characters this time.
All right, let's do this.
This is Outlaw singing Bohemian Rhapsody.
Wait, no, not me singing it. I just...
Oh. Is this the real life? Is this just fantasy caught in a landslide, no escape from reality? Open your eyes, look up to this. That's it. So, and all I really had there was just starting out real strong and then kind of fading down a little bit, which, James has called you out on many times.
Oh, man. Really? All right.
I can resist.
That's awesome. So what we got to here really is 120 characters. If you go much longer, it's probably bad.
Yeah, he says it's careless.
It's careless. And I would agree with that. I actually like what Joe said, although I don't do two methods. Usually I'll do one method per line, right? So if you're chaining a bunch of them, then I'll come down and indent the next line and do dot something, and then go down the next line, dot something. And that way it's just really easy to follow. But, if your language doesn't support that, I could see how it could get longer.
If I actually look at my monitor, which is an ultra wide to be fair, but if I look to see how far I can actually get, how many characters, I'm looking at over 335, which is well into the mama just killed a man section.
It's all based off Bohemian.
It's the standard, man.
I like the metrics, man. That's actually how all things should be done in business from now on.
If you got to mama, you've gone too far.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I mean, even if you are on an ultra wide monitor, though, and you might be tempted to think like, well, who cares? Because it's just me. I'm the only one looking at this. I've got this ultra wide monitor, so I'm going to make the lines as wide as I think makes sense, so that I can get this done. Well, you might be thinking short sighted, because then you can't, if you wanted to like split screen that ultra wide monitor and look at two files at the same time in that editor, then you're going to find yourself scrolling back and forth in one of those windows because you made this really long, you reached mama.
Or then you shrink the font, which he also said, right?
Oh, God.
A lot
if
of
you have to
younger
shrink
people,
the font
Yep.
to read the file,
That's a problem.
I mean, you've passed ludicrous and you went to plaid.
So
I keep finding myself shrinking websites. Like I'll go to them and the font will be so big. I have to turn my neck to read the sentence, because I guess it probably scales out, mobile first and all that jazz. So it drives me crazy. I shrink it down.
yeah, I do the same thing. Command minus. So another thing they said was put spaces on both sides of an assignment operator like an equal sign. Now, I have to say, I do this on equal signs. I do not do it for colons. Like if I'm writing JSON, I do not like putting a space before the colon.
Yeah, I was
definitely
gonna say the
put
same
one
thing.
after it, but I hate it before it.
That is the correct answer.
Yeah, I think Will and I actually argued about that one too.
I can't tell
He's
you why I
passionate
like it
about
that way.
spacing. You know what? I can't either. Honestly, I don't know why I don't like the space for it. If it's not there on the equals, I'll go crazy. But if it's there on the colon, I absolutely lose my mind. I can't take it.
A space before it.
Yeah, I don't like it.
Yeah, he talks about doing this same kind of thing though, like trying to set some sort of order of operations related to math,
Yes.
and your use of spacing there to try to signify the things that are going to happen before and after. And I'm like, and he even later formats or comments on it that his exact quote was, "Unfortunately, most tools for reformatting code are blind to the precedence of the operators and impose the same spacing throughout. So subtle spacing like those shown tend to get lost after you reformat the code." And
They do, but I will say this, and I've always felt this way, even when I was doing math. I don't like this whole thing of so what he was doing, what he was explaining right there is like, let's say you have A times B times C, and then minus. He would put a space for the minus and a space after the minus, and then C times D times E. So the multiplication comes first, obviously, and the minus is next. I don't like that. I've
Nope.
never liked that. I would rather group it with parens, so it's super obvious.
oh no, he did do that in his example, but he would have in parentheses no spacing. Okay, open paren A times B close paren, and there's no spacing in any of that. All 5 of those characters are one right after the other. Space minus space parentheses C times D.
Did he have the parentheses in there? You looking at it?
Yeah.
I could have sworn he didn't have the parens in it.
I mean, I can hand you the book, but yeah, no, he did.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah. In that case, I mean,
And-
I would
and-
put the space before the minus and all that. I was just saying I like the grouping. Like,
Well, but he goes even further. Like in his example though is actually division. So he had space before and after the divide symbol.
I typically do that.
And
it
it's
gets
like-
lost in parentheses, right? Like you can't really see it.
It does, but to his point though, if you hit that thing with a reformatter, it's going to put spacing in between your A times B,
Yeah.
right? It's going to make it's going to reformat it as A space times space B.
Yeah.
I like the
definitely
spaces.
like this. You like the spaces? I'm indifferent on the spaces on the multiplication type stuff, but I don't know. I could go either way with that one.
I guess this was just like one of those examples though where it kind of bothered me, where it's like the suggestion is inconsistent with tooling that's out there. So it's like, why bother to make this suggestion?
Right.
It's inconsistent.
If you're going to be fighting it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that, I mean, not to harp on the newspaper, but I kind of feel like you're going to be fighting that too, right?
I don't know.
So-
I never reformat the code, so I'm good.
Yeah. Okay.
Newspaper is correct, and it just feels right.
This will be a dead horse by the time the show's over.
I'm pretty sure. Like, is newspaper even a thing anymore? Didn't it?
It
Like,
is.
the internet
Magazines-
killed it.
magazines
So
do the same.
It should. So therefore, newspaper metaphor should die because the internet killed it.
We have Kindles; they do
Yeah.
the same.
Yeah, I think we just call it normal now.
Oh God.
So he also said he doesn't put spaces before a paren after a function name. I agree with that.
Yeah.
I don't like seeing function space open paren, like that drives me crazy.
Yeah, you don't call it that way, right?
Well.
Right? You don't.
So if you had a public method called get name, right? You wouldn't say get name space open paren close paren,
Correct.
right? And that's fine. Now, if it was a declaration,
I still don't.
but if it was a JavaScript declaration
I
and it was
still don't.
anonymous,
Oh, then you just do
Then-
function space.
you should, although JavaScript will take anything. But the kind of going back to the JavaScript, the good parts. The author, I can't remember his name off the top of my head.
Douglas Crockford.
Douglas Crockford, thank you. He made the point of saying that you should put you should make it as part of your anonymous function declaration, function space, open parentheses, and then any arguments, close parentheses, because what you're trying to signify in that scenario is that function isn't a method, right? There's no name on that. Function is a keyword to say, hey, I'm about to define a method.
Right.
Right?
The new
And then if you were
ES6
to-
stuff's pretty cool. It's like the lambda kind of syntax when you do like parentheses, arrow function.
Yep.
You know, the fat arrow.
Yep. I do like those. There was another one here also to do with methods was putting spaces after individual arguments. So if you have argument 1, comma, put a space, argument 2, comma, put a space. I agree with that visual separation. I do not like the space before the parenthesis or before the first argument or after the ending argument. I think that's crazy talk.
Yep.
Oh,
So multiple variable declarations, though, of the same type on the same line. Like, do you like that?
No.
what,
Yeah.
like string A, comma, space
Well, because that's
B?
what you were just describing, right? Is like, yeah, like string A, comma, space B, comma, space C, semicolon, right?
Yeah.
Or string space A, comma, new line B,
Oh,
comma, new line C, semicolon.
I like new line on those. So these
Neither.
were arguments to a method. You don't like that either?
Yeah, var. You have to have the word var on each line.
Oh, no string.
And if you've got so many variables to cut at the top there that's distracting, then maybe your function is doing too much.
No. I don't think. Well, one, I don't think 3 variables would count as distracting.
Right? Yeah, 3 is fine. If you've got 10, then there's something else going on.
I don't know. 10 is not unreasonable either, depending on what you're doing.
10 with 10 variables in JavaScript, man, you could do just about anything. You can like go to YouTube,
take over the world.
and download something. I mean, you can do a lot of crazy stuff in JavaScript.
I feel like
with 10
we
variables.
should have like a whole like HackerCon about like, you know, how many variables can you use to hack this environment?
Or it's
You
like,
know,
what's the
fewer
biggest,
fewer
stupidest
you
thing
use,
you
you
do
win.
in JavaScript in 10 lines?
Like it's like the opposite of a name that tune, right? Except like hack that environment.
Yeah.
You can hack that environment in one line.
Oh, we just hit the place where they were talking about the block formatted variables. And if you've seen this, you probably have. If you've ever done any database stuff, you'll see that the column is on the left. Then they'll tab over a certain number of spaces and then do the type. And then they'll tab over and do something else. And he was saying, don't do that. It's distracting from the story of the code. I agree. I don't like it.
Yeah, I like that in SQL, but after reading this again, I was like, "Oh wait, crap! You're right. I don't care about these types in vertical order. I don't care about int, datetime, int. What I care about is the horizontal association. So why am I making that harder just to make something look pretty vertically, which I'm not even using?"
Yeah, I don't like the lining up. I never have, but it is very prevalent in SQL.
Yeah, SQL's terrible, man. And even the word declare, like, declare. I was just talking about how I'll do in JavaScript, I'll do var A equals var B equals var C. In SQL, man, I do one declare because declare is such a monster word. Generally, it's even longer than the variable I'm declaring. I don't want that thing to, 3 times in a row. You can't even read what's going on. Like, how many characters is declare? That's like a good chunk of that 80. Right there.
Chunk of the 80.
That's 7 right there. Yeah, on your Bohemian Rhapsody, that is this. So,
Yeah, you have a datetime in there, man. You're at 17 already. No variable name.
The next part was lining up your code. Code is hierarchical. Never really thought about it like that, but it totally is. As you get into a scope, whether it's an if block or a while loop or something like that, you just indent, right? You should always do that so that people can look at your code and understand what in the world's going on. Now, however, I did have a question or a thought on this one, and this is actually SQL based. So have you ever gone in to do a function or a stored proc in SQL, and there's no good way to trace your progress? So you might do a print, and you might be indented over 4 levels because of all your logic in your proc. But to print, you want that thing to show up on the line all the way to the left. And so I'll do a print and then go down a line and put my message on the left. And so it just looks nasty in the code.
Yeah, I do that so I don't forget to remove it after.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, I don't know a way around it. Like, if you want to start at the next line, is there a better way?
I feel like this is already a code smell. Like the fact that you're your stored procedure is so complicated that one, you're indented to 4 levels, and then 2, it's so complicated that you need to have print statements in there to see what it's doing. That's a
Welcome
code
to
smell
SQL.
already.
I wouldn't even say a code smell. You ever had a trigger and you needed to check the nest levels or
Please.
I mean, seriously, like at that point, you will thank yourself for having those print statements in there.
Oh man, SQL modularizing SQL is just a joke anyway. But SQL is such a terrible language to work with. There's so many just little sugary bits that have not been added over the years that just drive me crazy. But I'm sure there's really good reasons, and believe me, I couldn't do any better. But man, there's some things about SQL that just eats me up, as you know.
Hey, dude,
I'm really not trying to join Joe's hater wagon for SQL though. But I mean, I really do feel like we've talked about this about like there's so many good coding habits, and then when it comes to SQL, it's like, oh, no, all bets are off. Like,
hey,
no,
by the
nobody
way,
does that.
Yeah, totally. If anybody's listening and you're trying to do good programming habits in SQL, you're probably doing it wrong. And I'm not being facetious. If you try and go the OO route because you're a programmer and you think, hey, we should make this thing modular, you're probably going to kill performance by going that route. So stop thinking like that and start thinking more about how do I work with data sets, because you will absolutely shoot yourself in the foot as you start breaking things apart and they start working on a row by row basis. So and
I mean, sadly, that's not. I mean, you have to think about sets. You can't think about modularity.
no, you really, I mean, you will absolutely destroy your performance. So at any rate, that was a little side tangent. One other thing the dude said.
So are we saying that is it that SQL sucks then, or is it that working with sets sucks?
SQL.
It's the SQL.
Yeah, I mean, if I could
think
just
in the-
order by something dynamically.
Dude, you just need to work in MongoDB and call it a day. MongoDB is pretty fun. If you've never messed with it, I think you would love it, Joe, because all your complaints are answered.
But I want to relate
first,
data.
MongoDB, that's a document DB. It's a NoSQL database, right?
yeah.
So like automatically it's a win for Joe because he hates SQL. So this is NoSQL.
Yeah.
So
I do hate the SQL
when,
language, but they've got their own query language, which is probably way
it's
better.
pretty easy, though. No, it's more like OO type stuff. It's pretty easy stuff. Usually.
Yeah, I mess with it a little bit, just kind of mess around. But for the most part, like I want to relate data. I want to join things and deal with data in sets. It's just the actual syntax of SQL drives me crazy, and it drives me crazy that was set like in the 80s, and that there's still not ways to do things that are really common, and that just seem like no-brainer things to add to me.
maybe they just got it right.
I assure
I mean, it was
that's not the case.
the 80s. I mean, think about it. You had Back to the Future, Reaganomics, DeLoreans.
Look,
I mean,
man.
come on, DeLoreans.
Joe's a closet SQL lover. That's all there is to it.
I think that's really what it is. He says all of this, but all of this hate about SQL, and it's really so that he can, feel it's to counteract how much he actually loves it.
Yes.
Yep.
And he's trying to, he doesn't want to, hipsters to be like, oh my God, that guy's like way too much into SQL. So he has to like throw out the SQL hate there.
Yeah, 2 words, man: paging and sorting.
Okay, you got 2 good points.
Yep.
Actually, that was
it's like
3
one of the
words.
most common things you ever do, and you have to jump through some stupid hoops for it. It drives me crazy.
I agree.
You only asked for 2 words, so you get paging and.
Yes, sorting's gone. So back
programmers.
to the it was an off by 1 error, as always. So the other thing he mentioned, and I've done this. I know we all have. Like you'll have a bunch of like public properties in C#, and you'll have your getters and setters, and really they're just doing a get return something, and you'll be like, oh man, I don't want 500 lines for this. I'm going to collapse it down so that the get and the set are all on the same line. And he said, I'll usually go back and split them back out so that visually you can see what's going on. I don't know how I feel about that. Usually what ends up happening is I'll have a bunch of those properties and I'll have the gets and sets on the same line, and then there'll be one that needs actually a private property, and I'm like, oh, I can't in good conscience only do this one this way.
Well, I thought though, I'm trying to find that exact part though. Wasn't he talking because his context or frame of mind for this section was coming from a Java world, which doesn't have the get and set auto properties that you're referring to in C Sharp.
His were more like getters and setters.
So I thought it was more like if statements, like
It could have been that too.
if something's true, then you would immediately have a return, and it's all on the same line.
Yes, something very similar to that.
If I recall. But so as it relates to the getters and setters in C Sharp, if it's simple, auto properties that do nothing, then fine. Yeah, I mean, I'm all for just keeping it simple on the one line. You're right. As soon as you break out the first one, then you got to break out the second one too.
Yeah, because you just start feeling like it's wrong.
Well, I think syntactically though, you can't. You have to. Syntactically, you can't.
No, I'm not talking about breaking out the get and the set individually. I'm talking about like the ones that you had done before it, like the auto properties that were above it. Like
No. Auto properties. You don't need to. Auto properties, your get and set are defaults by the compiler, so they can be empty. So I'm saying like, okay, so you have one auto property, and then you have a second property in your class class that is not an auto property. So you're going to provide the get and setter, right? I have no problem with mixing that, letting the auto property be, using the default auto property and not bothering to break that out on a separate line, because what would you have, like get semicolon new line set semicolon, because it's an auto property.
So maybe not an auto property. If you're thinking about like, so you have a private backing variable, so it's not an auto property, but it's one of these public properties that you're just getting. So you might be literally just saying set this equal value, get return whatever property. Like typically I'll have that on one line because I'm like, man, that's such.
So you're saying you'd have like, let's go back to we've talked about get name as the canonical reference during this episode. So you have an auto property for name, and you want to have a getter for it. So, and you have a private backing field for it called underscore name.
Yep.
So you would have get
curly brace.
Curly brace. Well, semicolon. No. Get curly brace.
Return.
Return underscore name semicolon curly brace.
Yep.
Set semicolon value or underscore name. Curly brace underscore name equals value semicolon curly brace.
Yep. I would
and in
keep
that
that on
simple
one line.
example, I would be okay with that too.
Yeah, but then the thing is then you'll get one that's got more complex business logic behind it. And then you're like, man, I broke that out into 5 lines. Maybe I should do the other ones into 5 lines. It's just
Here's the thing, because I'm kind of indifferent about that one. Like I would probably, in the one line examples, I would probably write them out there. And if the IDE or a ReSharper or whatever plugin, if I had some plugin and it was like no, let's be consistent and format this, whatever, I wouldn't care. The one example where I am more, let's say that you have an if statement and a return statement. So like, let's say, you have some method and you say like, oh, well, if this value is null, then just return early, right? And you would have the return on the same line. I can't stand that.
I don't like that
Cannot stand that. Not only, and I take it a step further. Now, it would be an extremely, I'm not saying I never have, because there are like extremely rare instances where I might have a return statement on the same line as the if, right? But like 1 in a billion, right? Like,
I don't think I've ever done it.
I can think of one example where I have, and the whole method was 3 lines long.
I love it.
Right?
No, you don't.
I
Really?
love it in Ruby. Return if condition. 1 line.
Oh, well,
Boom.
that's different, man.
Yeah. Perl has some similar kind of syntaxes like that. But where I would take it a bit further, like let's stay strictly in a let's confine this to Java, C#, JavaScript, C, and C++, right?
Not fancy languages.
So well, those because 4 of those are strongly typed.
Right.
In that case though, what I take it a step further, and I like to include not only the return on the next line, but I wanted to go ahead and put the curly braces around it, because even though I might not need it in that case because it's only one line, more often than not, I'm going to want to add a second line to that if statement. And so I'm going to have to add the curly braces eventually anyways, whether like maybe it's a debug statement that I want to add, or some new logic that I need to add, or maybe I need to add some logging in because I'm doing a return in this particular scenario or whatever. Eventually, inevitably, I'm going to want to add one or more additional lines to that if. So go ahead and put the curly braces there to protect myself in the future, so that I don't end up in a Apple go to fail.
Yep.
Error, right?
Yep.
That's my thinking.
I agree. I feel like it should be on a separate line so it's obvious. That's pretty much it. And they actually talked about something similar in the book for while statements. Don't do a cute while statement with the semicolon at the very end of the line, because people won't see it. They won't realize that it's not actually doing anything. Put it on the next line. Make it obvious. Make it jump out.
He mentioned that, and I was like, whoa, I've never written a while statement like that. It was referred to as dummy scopes.
Yep.
And so like, he's reading a buffer, he's doing a buffer read in his while statement, but there's no body to the while, so he just puts a semicolon in there. I've never written anything like that. I've never even stumbled upon somebody else's code that was written like that. If I did, I would strongly slap them. Like, what are you doing? Why would you write that like that? That's horrible. Have you guys ever written a while loop like that?
No. I've infrequently written while loops.
Infrequently written while loops.
Yes. Or do whiles. Haven't done those much either.
I mean, they have their place, but
They do.
I just felt like that's
You're just kind of asking for it.
Yeah, you really
yeah,
are. Yeah.
really.
It's a hit.
Even his suggestion of putting the semicolon on the next line and indenting it. So basically, you have the semicolon in his example. His spacing is that the next line would start 3 characters over. So in his example here, the semicolon would be below the I in while.
Just hanging out there. Most people would be like, somebody
what?
screwed up. Let me delete that line.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Which goes back to Joe's point about you're asking for it, because when that guy deletes something, now suddenly that while loop is going to be doing something else.
Yep.
Right? Like, why would you do that? Why would you write a while loop? Like, that's the bigger problem here. Like, this whole dummy scope thing that he's talking about, like, oh, hey, just put this, your semicolon on the same line is going to be lost. Let's put it on a new line so that someone else, can see it. But it's like, well, the bigger problem is, why are you writing while loops like this?
Yeah, that's crazy. I've never seen one done that way.
Like,
infinite loop could be the least of your problems, depending on what the next line is.
Right? Seriously. So to cap all this off, basically, he reiterated again, follow team's formatting rules, don't go vigilante. I mean, that's kind of how he ended it, and he showed his own formatting stuff at the end of it, which, I mean, it was all pretty, and, we agree on most of it.
Do we?
Most of it.
Do we?
Not all of it. And there's some things that me and Joe are right about. But,
Were you?
As far as books go, though, and we definitely we're a pretty opinionated bunch, but I think that we can all agree that we agree on 90% of this book. Maybe 95.
Which is surprising. As much as we've all programmed, I think that's saying something.
Well, okay, here, I got a better way to phrase that. We can agree that we agree on some percentage.
That's the very program.
We just can't agree on what that percentage is.
Right.
I'll take it. And we'll have a link to the book in the show notes.
Yep. And if you happen to win it, awesome. You can also figure out whether you agree or disagree with us on some of these things. And now it's time for the tip of the month this time.
Oh, no. Week. Definitely week.
All right, week. All right, here we go. What you got?
All right. So I found this. This tip was mentioned to me by a peer, and I was like, "Oh my god, this is going to change my world." I never thought to even try this or knew that you could do this. This is a Chrome tip. And, actually, I should have tried this in like a Firebug or Edge. And so maybe it exists there. So, you know what? Maybe it's more than a Chrome tip, but this is going to be specific to Chrome. And you can try it in other browsers and see if it works there as well. But I was trying to debug something. And what was happening is I had this div, and it looked great momentarily, and then as I would step through my JavaScript, suddenly it was getting set to display none. And I'm like, what is happening? Why would anyone display none this beautiful div? That's why I made it, because it looked so amazing. Why would someone else just randomly decide, oh, no, it should be hidden? and so I was like, where is this coming from? And it took me forever trying to figure this out until a coworker showed me this most beautiful tip in the Chrome DevTools. You can break on an attribute modification. Did you know that?
So you choose your element in the console.
So you inspect your code, right? You find whatever your element is. You right click on it. There's a break on. Okay. You can break on subtree modification.
Sweet.
You can break on attribute modifications or node removal, right?
Very nice.
So what'll happen is it's not necessarily like a JavaScript break because you're not putting a break in a particular JavaScript file, right? But as soon as something happens to that element, the page execution stops, and you can see in the JavaScript's call stack, you can see what's happening and what's changing your element.
That's
nice.
awesome.
I never knew that, and it changed my world when I found out about it. I was like, that is amazing.
That just changed mine a little bit, I believe.
Yeah, I guess
Because-
you could have done it like old school. You could have created an event with a debugger statement in, but this just kind of takes away all of that.
Yeah, as soon as he mentioned that to me, I found out what was display nunning my div in 30 seconds. It's like
That's
all I did was a
killer.
refresh and boom, there it was. And it was like, oh yeah, there's the stack trace. I can see exactly what was happening.
That's killer.
Yeah, it's nice.
That's a new
So
one.
break on attribute modification is the break on attribute modification is what I'm going to title, today's tip of the week for me. But like I said, you could do subtree modifications or you could do node removal, right?
That's sweet.
In addition to, it's awesome.
That's a biggie. I will be using that.
And you know
tomorrow.
what? Yeah. Because so I'm hoping that a lot of listeners get a lot of love out of that one. A lot of people seem to like the feedback, the tip that I gave. Was it last time on the actions
Yeah, that
for
one was
Visual
cool.
Studio? That one seemed
Yes.
to get a lot of feedback too. A lot of positive feedback.
It's those little gems that make your day so much easier, right? I mean, it really does make a huge difference. So this one is kind of apropos for the topic we have here. And Gustav Carlson from Slack had mentioned this eons ago. Like, he was one of our first Slackers, which was awesome. And he had mentioned this particular one, and I had forgotten to bring it up, but it goes perfect with today's discussion, and it's called editorconfig.org. So we were talking about, the problem with setting up teams with different editors is, they all have like their own defaults. Well, what editorconfig.org does is it allows you to take an editor config file, set up how you want it to do your formats, your curly braces, your line spacing, all kinds of things, right? And the beautiful part is this thing works with a ton of different editors without any plugins. So BBEdit, Builder, CLine, GitHub, GOGS, IntelliJ, RubyMine, SourceLayer, TortoiseGit, and WebStorm. Well, it also supports other IDEs as long as you use a plugin. AppCode, Atom, Brackets, Coda, Code Blocks. Interesting. Eclipse, Emacs, Genie, Gedit, JEdit, Komodo, NetBrains, Notepad++, PHP, Storm, PyCharm, Sublime Text, TextAdept, TextMate, TextAdept. Didn't see it. Vim, Visual Studio Code, and Xcode. So basically, there are a slew of editors out there that this particular format works with, so that what you were talking about earlier, like with WebStorm, right? You have a config file out there. Everybody that's using WebStorm, they automatically get that same type thing. Well, now you can take it a step further with editor config. You can literally set it up for your entire team that you've agreed upon, and then everybody could use this thing across whatever IDE they choose. So pretty awesome stuff. It allows you to work a little bit smoother without everybody having to worry about how everybody else is coding. And
Very cool.
So, yep, thanks to Gustav on that one.
Yeah, that's very nice. So my tip of the week is actually a YouTube channel. Is that what you call it? Something you can subscribe to called Coding Math. And what it is it's a guy who makes these kind of mathy, programmery videos, but don't let the mathy scare you. They do really cool things like he'll kind of program through generating a fractal or doing some tree type stuff like you kind of talked about, and the link we've got in the show notes, Alan. And other just cool stuff like easing functions that you can use to kind of make, like you'll see it in browsers when elements will kind of slide towards each other and slow down as they get closer. Just all sorts of kind of like little mathy things that you see in programs. They're just kind of neat. And you can go watch a 15-minute video. He'll demonstrate something in just a little simple algorithm that has actual, a visual effect. And you can take the code and play around with it. And especially the fractal stuff is just really cool. And he'll explain how the algorithm works. He'll give you the code. And it's, usually like the one I'm looking at here for drawing a fractal is like, 70 lines. So it's not real big. And it just does some cool stuff. So it's neat to get to kind of play with that stuff. And just, nothing else, just watch the videos and be inspired.
Very cool.
All right. Well, that will wrap up episode 50. We didn't even talk about that this is the 50th episode. Like I feel like that's a milestone that went undiscussed.
It's pretty crazy, right?
Yeah, it's like 10 years of the way we release episodes, right?
No,
seriously,
this is like 3 years. Yeah,
we're almost right at our 3-year anniversary, and we're 50 episodes in. That's pretty awesome.
Not quite like 17 episodes a year.
Yeah. That's we've gotten a little bit better this year about it. I think we've tried to step it up a little bit.
Maybe sometimes we've gotten better about it this year.
Yep. But yeah, that's awesome. Thanks everybody for hanging out with us the entire time. We get awesome feedback all the time, and it really is amazing.
Our listeners are amazing.
Yeah, and it makes it to where it's fun for us, and we keep wanting to do it, right? So, keep the comments coming, keep slacking, and it really does make it so it's fun for everyone.
So we hope you've enjoyed another episode of Clean Code as we talked about Chapter 5, formatting, and why the newspaper metaphor sucks. Be sure to leave a comment at www.codingblocks.net/episode 50 for your chance to win a copy of the book. Subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, and more using your favorite podcast app, and be sure to leave us a review by visiting www.codingblocks.net/review.
And you can find all the show notes, examples, discussions, and more there as well.
And you can send your feedback, questions, or rants to our Slack channel, codingblocks.slack.com, and follow us on Twitter at codingblocks, or on Facebook, or pretty much anywhere else. You can join the mailing list and enter into contests, because we give away really awesome stuff pretty often.
We really do. Yeah, how come we never get any of that stuff?
I know. Yeah, but we're getting the short end of the stick on this deal.
We are.
Always the giver.
Yes. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. That's coming up. So, yeah, we'll all be eating too much.
Well, but Thanksgiving isn't a thing outside of America.
Yeah, it's also like the worst holiday. No presents, no candy.
Yeah, we got Black Friday.
Yeah, true.
Cyber Monday.
Do we have Cyber Monday?
Yeah, it's coming.
All right, whatever.
All right.
Enjoy your shopping weekend coming up.
There you go. Now there's something we can get excited about.
Right?
Yeah, we picked a side in the war on Thanksgiving.
Enjoy all your
Great,
future
guys.
sales on Newegg and Amazon. Yeah. All right.
That's a wrap.